Meeting for March 27th, 2024 to order. Jesse, if you'd like to read the instructions, please.
All right. Welcome to our virtual transportation commission meeting. We're going to be covering a few basic items before beginning. If you lose connection at any point during the meeting, you can reconnect by clicking the link or calling the number in your original email. Commission members and city staff. Members, if you are able, please activate your video and keep it on for the duration of the meeting. Staff, if you are able, please activate your video when you are speaking. Use the raise hand feature when you'd like to be recognized to speak. Staff will click raise hand when you are asked a question. The chair to do their best to call on committee members in the order in which their hands are raised. Lowering your hand will take you out of the queue. Members of the public who have registered to speak. The name you entered in Zoom must match the name you entered in registration. You will remain muted until called upon. The clerk will tell you when your time is up. After speaking, a member of the body may ask you a question. If you need to share documentation with the board, please send it to the email list in today's agenda. Chair, the floor is yours.
Thanks so much, Jesse. Aiden, if you would call a roll, and I know Harold asked for a link, so I don't see him here, but he's supposed to be coming, so we can watch for him.
Sure thing. Hey, Jesse, I don't know, some staff I don't think received an invite. Would you be able to resend the invite out?
Yep.
Thanks.
Harold said he did not receive an invite. He's going to try and come in as a registrant, so you might need to promote him.
Okay, I'm looking. I don't see him in there.
All right.
Yeah, I don't know what's up with that. We had that same issue last time, Jesse, where a number of people didn't get invites. So I don't know if something different happened with how they're getting sent out. But we had that same thing happen with a number of people last time. So I don't know what's different about these two times versus our other invites.
To my knowledge, the process is the same. So I'll look into it and see if there's a issue with maybe the import list or.
Okay, that would be great. Thanks, Jesse. And you had I sent out I copied you on the listing of the members earlier today, so you can have that for just quick reference. Okay, Aiden, if you call a roll, please.
Sure. Juliana Bennett. MGR Govindarajan. Dina Nina Martinez Rutherford.
Present.
Alder Harrington McKinney.
Present.
Ann Kovich.
Here.
Robbie Weber.
Here.
Denise Jess.
Denise was not feeling well, so she said it was very possible she would not be able to be here. So let's put her down as excused.
Sure. Pepe Barros is also excused. Darren Wozniewski is also excused. Chris McCahill.
Here.
Nikki Vandermeulen.
Here.
Bill Bremer.
Here.
And Harold Kleems.
I don't see Harold in the attendees or in the panelists. So, Jesse, I don't know. What can we do to help Harold get into the... Oh, and Alder Bennett just signed in, it looks like.
Harold is still trying to get on.
I see Alder Bennett with us now. I don't know what we can do, Jesse, to help Harold get into the meeting, because you said you sent him another invite, right?
Yes, actually, the process was hung up, but it got sent just a minute ago. It was just kind of spinning there for a second, but it should be receiving one any second now.
Okay, all right. Then maybe he can use that to get signed in, because I don't see him in the registrants. So, okay. So, both Bill and Nikki can vote because we have a couple of people who are missing. So we're good to go in that regard. And there's Harold. Sorry about the issues, Harold, with the invites. Jesse's going to look into why that's happening. So we're not sure. So sorry about that. Aiden, do we have anybody? I know we had an email from somebody under number 1. Do we have anybody registered to speak under number 1?
We do not. No.
Okay. And I noticed a number of people in the attendees section. Do we have people registered to speak on other items?
We do. Yep. Item 2 is the first one.
Okay. All right. Do we have any disclosures or recusals this evening? Okay. Seeing no hands. Okay. And I missed the minutes. Did everybody have a chance to take a look at the minutes? Do we have a motion to approve the minutes from the last meeting? Harold?
Approval.
And do we have a second? Chris? Was that your hand up? No? Somebody can we get a second from somebody? Alder Martinez Rutherford? Okay. So we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Okay, I'm going to assume a unanimous consent vote unless anybody wishes to vote no or abstain. If so, please raise your hand. Okay, that motion is carried. Now we would normally move on to item 2. Tom, there was some question about whether Mike was going to be able to join. Do we need to try and defer item 2, or is it just not looking good?
He will not be able to join. So that,
Okay.
yeah, I think he might actually be in the air right now.
Okay.
I will give the presentation. I think Liz Callan was trying to get into Jesse and.
Yep, I see her now. She's there.
Okay.
She just joined, Tom.
Okay. So she'll do the first 7 or so slides, and then I'll do the middle portion, and she might do the end.
Okay. All right. That sounds good. I don't know what's up with these invites, Jesse. It's very strange. So if you can help us figure it out, we would really appreciate it. Okay. So we're taking item 2, the North-South BRT locally preferred alternative. Liz, are you going to start out then?
Yes, I am. Can everybody?
Okay. And let me just say, so since we do have people registered to speak, what we'll do is have the presentation, and then we'll hear from the public, and then we'll have discussion and questions.
Okay, sounds good. All right, so today we will be presenting the draft locally preferred alternative and next steps. And so what we are looking for today is simply to present information. We're not asking for a vote on anything. It's sharing information prior to the public involvement meetings coming up in April and getting your feedback on that information. So the overview of the presentation is to provide an introduction about the project. We'll summarize the draft locally preferred alternative, provide information about the public and stakeholder feedback that we've received and how we responded to that feedback, and then outline the next steps in the process for the project and to eventually get the locally preferred alternative approved. So just a quick introduction about the project. I know many are very familiar, but what we are now referring to as Rapid Route B will be Metro Transit's second bus rapid transit route. It's about 9.5 miles of new BRT running way with approximately 26 new stations. It will share 3.5 miles and 9 stations with Rapid Route A along the isthmus. And features of the service will include service every 15 minutes during most of the day, high quality stations with those raised platforms, as everybody has seen going up around the Rapid Route A line, priority at traffic signals, dedicated lanes with fewer stops, faster fare payment, and all electric 60-foot buses. We always want to include some information about why this project is important. And there's a lot of reasons why the Rapid Route B, the North-South BRT, is important, but this is kind of some highlights. So this route specifically, so the additional segments on the north and south sides of Madison and into Fitchburg will expand rapid transit service to 53,000 more people. It will provide that rapid transit service to 40,000 more jobs. It will also improve access to other very important destinations, including 43 schools and childcare centers, 10 grocery stores, 4 hospitals, and more. It will have features like high-quality stations with platforms, which will improve access and improve the experience for people that are already using Route B, taking it up to that next level of transit service. And it will especially improve the access with those improved stations and platforms for people with disabilities and seniors. It will have better sidewalk connections, traffic calming, and a new multi-use path on Park Street with additional safety improvements along the corridor. It will improve service for 14,000 lower income families who live near the route, many of whom depend on transit. And it will bring millions of dollars of federal funding in Madison's north and south sides for the construction of the stations, the running way, and the improvement of that transit service. Overall, we think this project really demonstrates our commitment to racial equity. Nearly 40% of residents along this new corridor are people of color. So what is a locally preferred alternative? It's kind of a technical term, but it's essentially a community's preferred mode and route that best meets the needs of the corridor. So the locally preferred alternative identifies the mode. We already know it's BRT, but we'll talk about that in a moment. The general route alignment, general station locations, and general running way characteristics. And it is not a detailed design document or the end of the analysis. A lot of work is left to do. But it also is not approval of funding or the end of public involvement. But it is important because it solidifies those key planning decisions that allows the project to move into kind of the next more detailed phase of design and engineering. It allows the project to begin that preliminary engineering and environmental analysis, which is an important part and does take quite a bit of time. So although decisions can be revisited, the LPA allows some of those key decisions to move forward in order to keep the project moving. And so where are we in the process? So back in 2012, the Greater Madison MPO report recommended bus rapid transit corridors. That is when the mode analysis was done that identified bus rapid transit as the mode. And then between that time, there was a lot of work that was done. Obviously, a lot of work that was done on Rapid Route A, but also other parts of this route. But then in 2023, the project really kind of formally kicked off. We entered into the Federal Transit Administration's project development process. And then now in 2024 and 2025, we are looking to have the locally preferred alternative drafted and adopted, and then preliminary design, environmental review, and engineering can continue through 2025. We also received notice that the $118 million in federal funding is included for this project in the President's fiscal year 2025 budget request. So then in 2026, sometime in the time frame between 2026 and 2028, we're looking at construction for this project with the service open in 2028 or 2029.
Great. I might add, since we have the funding on this slide, that this is a capital project. And in the community right now, I think there's some confusion because, Madison, through the paper and everything, does have some challenges with the operating budget, right? And the operating budget is kind of our day-to-day. The North-South BRT does not really affect our operating budget. In fact, Route B is already in the Metro Transit system, is already being provided. What this does, though, is this allows, that same service that's currently in the operating budget to be provided on a more frequent basis with better level platforms and really kind of providing the same investments to our north and south sides that we are providing to our east and west sides. So this is a summary of the draft locally preferred alternative. We're going to be bringing this out to another round of public involvement meetings in April, and then hopefully we'll be introducing this to council for approval in May. And so this is kind of the TC's preview of what we're presenting and also allows you to provide a little comments to us. The mode and the route. In the 2012 MPO study, they analyzed bus rapid transit, light rail, commuter rail, and streetcar for enhanced transit service. Light rail was dismissed due to the high costs and recent roadway reconstruction. Light rail costs about 10 to 15 times more than bus rapid transit, just so it's an order of magnitude greater. Commuter rail was dismissed due to the high costs and the route limitations. The streetcar was dismissed due to the high costs and limited travel time improvements. Bus rapid transit was selected due to its cost effectiveness, route and station options, and travel time improvements. And then also the ability to integrate it into the existing roadway system. The MPO recommended bus rapid transit along 4 corridors. We are basically constructing the first 2 corridors on Route A, the east and the west, and the north and the south corridors. If you look at that report from now 12 years ago, it's essentially reflects what was established in that report. Route B was designed to serve a high density of people as well as other destinations with existing high ridership. The recommended service plan is shown here. Basically, the solid blue represents buses every 15 minutes. So that's a very high frequency. That means that you don't have to check your schedule. It means you can go to the station and the bus will come. But notice also that you have very good service, half-hour service in the light blue areas, shown on weekdays, Saturday, but then all day Sunday as well. You know, this is a substantial improvement from what existed before the transit network redesign. The running way in the stations, if we start from the north side to going south, we will be keeping the Troy Drive loop. I think Mike Chekvala and their team looked at about 5 or 6 different options because the loop isn't maybe as desirable as it could be, but in all the different options that they looked at, nothing could really provide the same service level. It would end up splitting up the service. So we will continue to have the loop and mixed traffic on the north side, which goes along Troy Drive, Murphy, and then Northport. Note that the layover will, or the north terminal will be at Kennedy. And so that's where buses will lay over and the buses will charge. From Troy Drive south to Schlingen, that will be dedicated lanes with center running buses. We believe that the typical section there of 3 lanes in each direction is sufficient that we could claim a bus lane. We've been performing the traffic modeling, and the results seem to be confirm what we think. The one change that has occurred here from when you previously might have seen this is that at one point we had at one point we had a station here. However, due to some of our public involvement, we've relocated that station that was at, actually it was right here at International, I'm sorry. We've relocated the station that was going to be at International to Elka and Schlingen. And so that that allows us to have basically 3 stations in place of the 2 stations that we had previously thought. It reduces costs a little bit at the Northport Packers intersection in that we do not have to reconstruct that intersection as greatly as we had would have had to otherwise. Let me clear that. I didn't say that as clearly as I could have, but hopefully we can come back if there's questions. Once we get to Schlingen, then bus rapid transit will run in mixed traffic and join the east-west routing at the Milwaukee station right there at North Avenue. Then the north-south BRT really follows the east-west BRT and uses the same facilities and travelway as the east-west BRT until they get to Park Street. On Park Street, the east-west BRT will be in mixed traffic until just before Regent, and then we hope to be able to provide center running lanes for the majority of Park Street, all the way down to basically Hughes and Badger. Note that there will be one small section of southbound BRT between, I guess, West Washington and Aaron Street, where it will be in mixed traffic. This is to preserve and kind of acknowledge some street parking that serves kind of a variety of smaller businesses there that really don't have a lot of off-street parking. This is really in response to some rather intense comments and interactions that project staff like Liz and Mike have had with the different business owners. Note that instead of having the bus rapid transit come across on Badger, it will come across one intersection sooner. This will allow us to decrease the size of the Badger Road Park Street intersection, which I think is advantageous to the intersection. It also helps us avoid some of the congestion that occurs there. Stations that have been moved include one was going to be at, I believe, Olin, and that has been since moved or relocated to Cedar. That is to serve the new grocery store that will exist there. I think there's been a lot of city investment and private investment in that area by Cedar, and so this, the relocating the station to that street kind of acknowledges that investment. As we go south on Fish Hatchery Road, we hope to have center running bus lanes. Right now, the bus lanes on Fish Hatchery Road are side running. The city of Fitchburg would prefer center running, and we're working with Dane County Highways to see and maybe confirm that we can continue to have those center running way along in Fitchburg. The terminal station will be on McKee Road. There has been some discussion of extending it down to Lacey Road to meet their government center, but I think Metro Transit has kind of been interacting with some of the policymakers in Fitchburg, as well as their staff, saying that perhaps transit needs to their city government center could be better met and more cost effectively met just using metro routes. Updates since December meetings. I guess I've kind of foreshadowed those a little bit. We've relocated the North Terminal from Sherman Avenue to Kennedy. This means that people won't have to wait at Sherman for the layover. I think that's been one common complaint that we've received on Route B. We've split the Packers Northport station into two separate stations, one at Elka and one at Dryden. If you think about it, the land uses around Packers, there aren't a lot, and the land uses that do occur there are kind of fenced in, so it's not very accessible. Whereas Dryden, you have the McDonald's, you have access to a fair amount of housing. And then it also stays as a station, but avoids placing the station in a pedestrian hostile environment, which is associated with that intersection. The station at International will be shifted to Schlimgen. Schlimgen has been a consistent challenge for traffic engineering over the 5 years, 6 years that I've been here, and that there is a need and a desire for pedestrian crossings there. There's a Montessori school on the east side. There's residential on the west side. This will provide us an opportunity to maybe enhance the urban context at that intersection and add a signal that has been desired there. As mentioned, we will be preserving some parking on Park Street in the southbound direction. That's basically between West Washington and Aaron, and that will require us to go in mixed traffic. In the northbound direction, we will be able to preserve some parking over by, you might say, Taquerias and the Oriental shop, as well as near the Ace Hardware. However, through some geometric creativity, we're able to maintain our dedicated bus running way in the northbound direction. The Olin station is split into 2 stations, as I mentioned, one at Cedar and Fish Hatchery. And then the planar one, I think, was in our previous one. One thing I wanted to note is that with this project, we are hoping to be able to reconstruct Park Street. Park Street right now is a very wide, very auto-oriented street. In fact, when we did our public involvement through Let's Talk Streets 2 years ago, some of the focus group says, well, why can't we have a Monroe Street? Why do we have to have Park Street? And we felt like that was a fair statement. And so with this project, we're able to leverage some FTA funds to reconstruct Park Street, narrow the lanes, provide the dedicated running way. In doing so, in most places, we will be able to provide a 7-foot terrace. So that means that we will now be able to support a tree canopy, which doesn't exist now, along the sides, which is nice. We also will be able to provide a fully protected side path on the west side, basically from Badger Road to Fish Hatchery Road. So this is extremely challenging. However, it's probably an opportunity that we could not implement any other way. Since this is a connecting highway, it has to be federal funds that kind of reconstruct this. We found a federal funding source, and we're going to try and leverage it to the extent that we can to make Park Street more humans-centered. Here's another rendering of what this might look like. This is a kind of the Wingert Creek. This is the Labor Temple. Here you can see the station. Here you can see the dedicated busways, and here you can see the shared use side path. Park and Badger is moved to Hughes. The former South Transfer Point is proposed to move 1/2 block north to the Hughes Place. This change removes BRT from Park and Badger intersection, which reduces delay and also allows the intersection to be smaller and more human scale. And then also, as you might know from other things, is that the City of Madison will be partnering to or kind of a mixed-use development there at the corner of Badger and Park Street. public and stakeholder feedback. Liz, maybe you might want to summarize some of this.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think some of this will be a little bit repetitive too of what we've already talked about. So I'll try to keep it relatively brief. But just to summarize what we've done so far for this project is we've done 4 public meetings that we held in November 2023. We had about 125 people participate in those meetings. And then we also recently completed an onboard bus rider survey at the end of February and in early March to get some feedback directly from bus riders about things like station locations and just other features they are looking to see, any feedback they have. And then we also have been doing, Metro has really been doing some outreach at public libraries where they've been sharing information about the BRT project, both the Rapid Route A and Rapid Route B. But then on top of that public engagement, we've also been doing a significant amount of stakeholder engagement. So we've had about 50 meetings in the last about 5 or so months. Including, all those that are listed there. I'm not going to read those off, but we're trying to get good coverage across different groups, making sure that we're touching anybody who might be interested, sharing information about the project, and also getting feedback from those groups. And we're also working on scheduling more. And then the key themes from the feedback. So this is kind of what we've already touched on a little bit, but just to kind of highlight what we've been hearing the most about. We hear a lot about safety concerns, just generally not necessarily transit related safety concerns, but road safety concerns. And those are along South Park, Packers, and Northport. That's where we've been hearing most of that feedback. We have heard feedback about those specific station locations that Tom mentioned that we've adjusted in some cases. In most cases, we've been able to respond to what we've heard multiple times about station locations, station spacing. So this is one we've heard, which is related to that the station spacing of 1/2 mile, which is standard for BRT, is too wide. So there's concern from some groups about access for seniors and people with disabilities who might not be able to make that longer walk. We've gotten a lot of feedback about an airport connection, and we can answer more questions about that. Parking and bike lanes, and some feedback about the South Termini. So we received comments supporting an extension of the route to Fitchburg City Hall. And then we also heard feedback and more so questions and concerns about the center running bus lanes and stations in the medians. So that's really something that is more of an education piece that we're working on, helping people understand why that is actually advantageous for the service and doesn't necessarily come with any safety concerns. It's, I think it's just a little bit of a, once people see it, people will understand more about how those center running stations will work. And so where we've been able to, we have been working on responding to those kind of key themes from the feedback. And so, regarding safety, we are working on incorporating those safety measures throughout the project where the funding allows us to do so. I think, obviously, the South Park Street will have a significant improvement in safety. On the north side, the funding isn't necessarily available for major overhauls of either Packers or Northport, and they have been recently reconstructed. So we're going to do what we can around the stations themselves to improve safety and improve safety at the crossings. And hopefully when those roads are ready to be reconstructed, there will be more opportunity for that. Again, kind of the relocation of some of those stations that Tom already went through. The station spacing, we are generally continuing to recommend that the project does retain a 1/2 mile spacing. That is standard for BRT. It is something that, is important to maintain the speed and reliability of the service. But we have added 2 additional stations, which does narrow that spacing a little bit in a few spots. And we've also been working on making sure if there's key areas where we think there's a large number of folks with disabilities or seniors, to try to locate those stations as close to those populations as possible, with one example being the Dryden intersection. And then we also had gotten some comments both about extending the north route to the airport instead of heading west on Northport. But then we've also gotten comments about shifting the route to Sherman. But because of the existing ridership we see on that Northport side and a variety of different reasons for the Packers Avenue, we are recommending that we keep the Packers to Northport routing at this time. And then parking and bike lanes, we have met individually with businesses and bike advocates to discuss concerns regarding retaining parking and retaining bike lanes. And we are working on, we do have a kind of a compromise proposed for the parking on South Park Street, where we do retain some parking. And the same goes for retaining a bike facility further south while also maintaining bus operations in those segments. On the south termini, discussions are ongoing about the extension to, it would be Lacey Road, but we do not currently recommend that based on operational inefficiency of that extension, the cost, and then the lack of transit-oriented density south of McKee Road. So basically what we're saying is, although there are destinations at the end of that, at the end of the termini down at Lacey Road, there aren't a lot of transit-oriented destinations along that segment. So we wouldn't expect to have a high ridership in those in-between stations. And so that would be a lot of cost to go further south. And then bus lanes and stations in the median, staff will continue to discuss these concerns, and we're working on just trying to educate folks about what that really means and help people kind of get a better understanding of why those center running stations make sense, and center running bus lanes, I should say.
Let's see. I'm sorry. There we go.
So just to wrap things up, kind of the next steps for the project right now, kind of in the next few months, we are looking at presenting basically what we're presenting to you all today, probably a slightly different version, but similar at the public involvement and stakeholder meetings that we have planned for April. And then in April and May, we will review the feedback that we get from those public involvement meetings and incorporate if needed. We will then plan to present the final draft of the locally preferred alternative to you all again in May at your May meeting, and also do the same to the Fitchburg Common Council and Transportation Commissions, where at that point we would be looking for a recommendation and an adoption of the locally preferred alternative. And then after that happens, the environmental review process can begin. So one of the key pieces of that is the area of potential effect is identified, which is just kind of an important milestone in the project. And then the design and engineering can continue to move forward. And, we also just want to note that the public involvement and stakeholder involvement will continue throughout the project. And there is still opportunities for feedback to affect the project itself. And then this is just kind of a highlight of the public meetings we have planned. So those will run from April 22nd through April 29th. We have 4 total meetings, with a virtual meeting kicking things off on April 22nd, and then a meeting in South Madison on the north side, and then in Fitchburg. So that concludes kind of what we have, and happy to answer questions.
Okay, let's hear from the public first, Liz, and then we'll go to questions and discussion. So Aiden, who do we have?
So first we have Benjamin Varick, neither supports nor opposes, and wishes to speak.
Go ahead, Benjamin, you have 3 minutes.
Hi, thanks. Can you all hear me?
We can.
Amazing. Thanks so much for that presentation. That was very informative. My name is Ben. I live off of Park Street in the Bay Creek neighborhood between Fish Hatchery and St. Mary's Hospital, right near the Taqueria Guadalajara there. And I have a comment about parking, and then I have a question for Liz and Tom. So I fully support removing all of the street parking along all of Park Street. I think it's a waste of valuable public space. Additionally, the BRT needs its own lane if it's to function as effectively as it can. I think to trade the center running dedicated bus lanes for underutilized street parking is a poor trade. I'm disappointed to see the city propose to add street parking back into the plan. And then my question is, so I walk and bike along Park Street every day, and it's quite inhospitable to anybody not in a vehicle. The number of car travel lanes and speed of car traffic make Park Street a large barrier to the neighborhood. As an anecdote, my partner and I were considering moving into an apartment on the east side of Park Street, but that would mean that she would have to cross Park Street every day on her bike for her commute. So we decided to stay on the west side to avoid crossing that barrier. I think reducing the car travel lanes on Park Street would make the area so much more vibrant and comfortable for anybody going to the businesses and restaurants along Park Street or crossing Park Street to go anywhere else in the city. It would help connect the neighborhood. Reducing the number of car travel lanes would also allow the shared use path and the terrace to continue all the way along South Park Street, all the way to University. Has the city considered reducing the number of car travel lanes on South Park Street?
I don't think we can answer your questions now because this is a public testimony, but if the commission members wanted to bring up your particular questions, we could ask them after the public hearing. Am I correct, Ann?
Yeah, that's correct. Thanks. So we're just hearing from you, Ben, and members have an opportunity to ask you questions. And then you also have the option to connect directly with Liz and Tom offline, which I'm sure, Liz, you'd be happy to do. And as Tom indicated, members can ask those same questions when we get into the discussion phase later on. So did you have any other comments, Ben?
Great. Thanks for that clarification. Just that I think street parking is a waste of space, and I'm interested to know what considerations have been done on removing.
Okay. Thanks, Ben. Do any members have any questions for Ben? Okay, thanks very much, Ben. Who do we have next, Aiden?
We don't have any more people for this item.
Okay. All right. Thanks so much for coming, Ben. So comments or questions? Nikki, go ahead.
Yes, I'm a little worried about the 1.5. I think you said roll between the rapid transit stations based on disability accessibility. I know a survey recently went out, and I know I actually missed it, and it was my bad that I did fill it out, and I apologize for that. At the same point, I do think that that's going to be a rather long distance, and I understand we're going to try and get it where most individuals with disabilities live. However, we're making assumptions that most people with disabilities want to live in the same place next to each other and with the same budget, and that's not financially, one, understandable, but number two, there's not enough necessarily. That's basically creating a separate area solely for the disabled instead of integrating them with everyone else. And so I'm seriously worried on those concerns, but otherwise I like the rest of it. Thank you.
Hey, Liz or Tom, do you have any comments with regard to what Nikki said?
Yeah, I think a half mile spacing is kind of typical for it to be considered bus rapid transit. Otherwise, if we go to quarter mile spacing, then it's more of a transit corridor. It's just regular transit. And so our proposal, to qualify for the bus rapid transit small starts program does have this half mile spacing. However, depending on where you live, generally you're within a quarter or a third mile of one of the stations. You see what I'm saying? That it's not like you have to walk a half mile. It just means that maybe you're in between one of the two, and you'll have to walk a third of a mile or a quarter of a mile. But I appreciate that concern. I think that was your main question. Was that correct? Yeah. Okay.
Yes. Sorry, I was muted. Yes.
Yeah. And I know, Liz, you're having a lot of interaction with different community groups. So Nikki, if there are groups where there haven't been interaction, please connect with Liz so you can have that opportunity for community sessions, even small ones, right, Liz?
Yeah, absolutely. We're happy to meet with any groups. And I don't think, I certainly didn't intend to imply that, people with disabilities only live in a certain area, but we do have some specific apartment complexes along the route that are specifically, sort of have a higher concentration of people with disabilities and seniors. And so we're actually working on getting specific meetings at those locations. So we're working with like the property manager to actually have a meeting there.
Oh,
and
nice.
So we're hoping that, will help, but I certainly see where you're coming from that, people with disabilities don't just live in certain areas of the city by any means. And then just one thing to note on the half-mile spacing, I think, although generally speaking, it is there are a half mile between stations, but you really aren't looking at asking someone to walk a full half mile. It's a quarter mile to one of the two stations. So if you're somewhere along the route, you are going to be able to walk a quarter of a mile and get to a station. Now, if you're further out, further away from, the actual route itself, then you might have a half a mile walk. But if you're along the route, it's really more like a quarter of a mile maximum.
I appreciate that. Thank you for the clarification.
Yeah. So Nikki, get in touch with Liz if you have some additional groups that where the city could benefit from having interaction.
Will do. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks. Alder Martinez Rutherford, you're next.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions. The first one, I just want to kind of get Ben's question about reducing parking on Park in there. I believe Tom said something about, or maybe you did, Liz, about supporting the small businesses that are there with the parking that would be replaced. Did I misconstrue that or hear that wrong?
I have a graphic that maybe kind of illustrates it. So this is a graphic that shows the businesses. This is the 3-block section that we're speaking of, and if you look at the businesses, they are generally local, generally small. Some are run by people of color, and some of them have some off-street parking, but many don't, right? And so this is an area where through a queue jump and some other, I'm going to say, lane marking gymnastics, we feel like we can allow that parking to remain while not substantially compromising BRT operation. Liz has been very good in that she's kind of done the lion's share of individually meeting with these businesses. And so, Liz, do you want to maybe add something to that?
Yeah, I think, our goal with trying to come up with an alternative option for this route was really to kind of find a compromise. So I think a lot of the businesses wanted to see all of the parking remain. And so what we did is we really kind of dialed into each business and looked at, the reality of the parking that they have available. As Tom mentioned, many minority-owned businesses and local that have been on Park Street for decades. So we did feel that it was in the interest of the city to kind of support those businesses in a way that, they are kind of asking us to a degree. And I think that segment that Tom initially pointed to, that's really the only segment where we won't have a dedicated lane. But then in the area near Taqueria Guadalajara, we actually will have a dedicated lane there. We're able to kind of carve out some parking. So we'll actually be able to have both. So I think it was really about finding a compromise. And I think generally this is that. But obviously it's not perfect, but I think we did have a lot of pretty vocal opposition from those businesses. So kind of, again, looking at those trade-offs and how can we, make something work generally for most people as somewhat of a compromise. But I also understand the question.
Tom, can you pull that back up real quickly? I just want to make a point for people that are in the area and for Ben. A lot of these businesses seem to be restaurants and places that require people to go into physically for a period of time. Seeing as how a lot of them are restaurants, they will have a concentrated amount of patronage at the same time. So having that parking would very much benefit those businesses, especially as somebody who owns a small business and has also been in the restaurant industry. So thank you for pointing that out and clarifying. My point has been made. Next, moving on. I am curious about the airport connection. As somebody who's lived in many cities with very vibrant transportation, I know that I've relied on it to get to the airport to get out of town when I've needed to. Also, additionally, knowing that there are a couple of organizations that could very much use a transportation system. Granted, it's just a couple, but I'm wondering what the thought process behind not adding that in that could meet the needs of people trying to get to the airport and also meet the needs of the organizations that are in the area, while you would only really need to, from my view, really only need to miss one of those stops on Packers.
Yeah, I can I can answer that. Not as well as Mike Chekvala could, but I will try. So we have relatively good service to the airport now. We have half-hour service through the D line, which is much better than it has been. And so if you want to get to downtown from the airport, you can, and you can every 30 minutes. To reroute the BRT through the airport and then back around, it would add 5 minutes to the trip. Okay. And our boardings, the last time I checked, I believe our boardings at the airport are between 25 and 50 boardings. So it's not a high ridership, compared to like several hundred downtown, right? And so, to catch those 30 or 50 boardings, we would be making everyone travel an extra 5 minutes to do that. And in reality, the service probably given by the D route is almost as good. You see what I'm saying? So Mike we had an option where we actually provided a 15-minute service to the airport, or we kind of split the line in two, right, and provide half-hour service to the airport. But then all of a sudden, our BRT line ends kind of right there at International, and we don't get the federal funding for everything beyond International. And so looking at those two things, that pretty dramatic, either time cost of 5 minutes for relatively few riders that already have a pretty good option now with the transit network redesign through Route D.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thanks, Alder. Robbie, you're next.
Thank you. I know that we have discussed before some of the restrictions, I'll say, on what we can do on Park Street due to it being a state highway. But for folks that might be listening in now or might listen to this recording later, perhaps you can go over that again. And this would be partly addressing Ben's question about reducing the number of travel lanes. I think we are actually in some way reducing the travel lanes because Park Street, especially South Park Street, where I just was today helping with voting, is unbelievably wide. And I think this will make it certainly easier to cross. But maybe, Tom, you can go over, or Liz can go over a little bit about the capacity, the number of lanes, and what WISDOT may or may not allow us to do.
Yeah, so this is a state route, and so we need all of our design to be approved by the Wisconsin DOT. We actually did look at a capacity reduction alternative, did a considerable amount of traffic modeling on it, and presented it to the DOT twice. They pretty much basically said, it just isn't going to happen. This graphic right here kind of illustrates, South Park Street, we have 26,000, South Fish Hatchery, we have 20,000, but some of the key areas where we're talking about the parking, we have 40,000, 47,000. These are some of the highest, traffic volumes we have in the city. If this were a city route, we could choose to say we'll live with the congestion. We'll perhaps reduce the capacity and we'll live with the congestion. But this is a state route, and so we have to have a memorandum of agreement with them, and they have to give us permission to do everything that we're going to be doing on Park Street. So,
just to follow up, I think that the part that I find most difficult to deal with, no matter my mode of transportation, is the part, I'll just say south of Wingra Creek. And I think we've got center running there. We're going to have a wide platform, which I've actually found on some of the places where platforms have already been built, actually makes it easier to cross the street because you have a nice, wide, safe feeling refuge as opposed to just a median. But, I am looking at the area down by the Villager Mall, Madison College, and that area that just is just ridiculous. And I think it looks like it's going to be a little bit more civilized once we get the construction done. But maybe you can just talk a little bit about, because we certainly have less volume in that area because Park Street's traffic is then split between Fish Hatchery and South Park Street. Everybody coming down from that big fat line that you just showed splits up between those two main roads.
Yeah, I guess our proposal to the DOT was to reduce the volumes, basically, I think, from Beld Street, which is just south of Wingra Creek, to Olin, so that we would have 2 through lanes in both directions. We did a considerable amount of traffic modeling. Operations diminished. We tried to address Wisconsin DOT's comments, and it just basically said it just isn't going to occur. And so we're in a situation similar to East Washington Avenue, right, where they have control. And I want to say that they are working with us. Our relationship with the Wisconsin DOT right now is much better than it would have been a decade ago. I feel like their project staff, are doing what they can to help us get through it. That being said, I think Madison staff are willing to accept more motor vehicle delay than Wisconsin DOT staff are willing to. Right now, kind of on a similar note that you were saying, right now, Park Street is wide open. You have 12-foot lanes, you have wide parking lanes. If you want to go fast on Park Street, you can. With our redesign, which puts in terraces and a side path and everything gets narrowed, right? And so I think it will have a feeling more similar to Atwood Avenue. And so I don't know if any of you have done the before and after drive on Atwood Avenue, but I feel like speeds are considerably slower on Atwood Avenue now with it reconstructed than, let's say, 2 years ago prior to its reconstruction. And so the effect that has occurred on Atwood Avenue, it'd be nice if we could replicate that effect on Park Street.
Thank you.
Thanks, Robbie. Harold, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Tom, following up on the DOT discussion, can you say, like, at what level of DOT are these decisions being made? Is that, like, yeah, as you said, planning staff, or is it the regional office, or is that higher up? I just want to understand, like, who has the power to say yes or no to these things?
What do I want to say this? So our interactions have been with planning level staff and kind of however, I have had individual discussions with directors and people much higher up, right? Discussing how things would play out if we pushed it and we really advocated for it. And I think that on things that are close, I think we can approach, policymakers within the DOT and ask if this is close. Can you lean? Can you maybe defer or give preference to a local opinion? But these numbers are, not in the middle so much. And so I've interacted with policymakers that are a little higher in the DOT, just to gauge the level of what it would take to get approval, if you know what I mean. So.
Okay. Yeah, thanks. I appreciate that. I just want to make sure we use all the avenues that we have to, get to where we would like to be. So appreciate that. My other question is about the retaining of parking. Can you say a little bit more about, we just heard 47,000 vehicles a day, high peak volumes, but still not having a dedicated lane will not influence BRT operations. I'm trying to square that together.
I'm wondering if
I can try to pull up that.
actually, I think I have it open.
Okay.
Do you want to let me just tell you what yeah, maybe this is the best way to so this is likely what it would look like. So we'll place the station on the north side of the West Washington Park Street intersection. And so you can see a southbound bus will get a queue jump, and we'll get to enter the mixed traffic lane prior to the other traffic. And so in the southbound direction, that's how it will probably work. In the northbound direction, this shows a queue jump, but in reality, we believe that there's probably enough right-of-way in this terrace that we might be able to provide a full dedicated lane for a couple 100 feet north on Park Street prior to Regent Street. Liz, did I capture that correctly?
Yeah, and I think the key part is that because of the queue jump, the bus, will be in the lane before, after it goes through that intersection. And, yes, there will be a possibility that it gets stuck behind slower vehicles in this lane, but the reality is that's probably pretty unlikely. And we did look at different options. Like we looked at, do we want to have peak parking only, for example, or, other options. And we also did parking counts. So the parking that we are retaining is utilized. And it is utilized at different parts of the day. So there are some restaurants that's obviously more utilized during those meal times. And then there's also retail, and like a barber shop and things like that where the parking is utilized. So I think, yeah, that's kind of what that was kind of what led us to this recommendation.
Okay. And did you say you moved the station location from the near to the far side?
Well, I guess near side and far side is depending on what direction, right?
Right. Did you move the station location?
Yeah, to the north side. Yes, we did.
Okay, and that is not concerning. I mean, there's the gas station with the driveway. I see the angled crossing with a very long crossing distance for pedestrians. I see that people who cross to the whatever direction down is have to then navigate the islands and the slip lane and all of that stuff. So did you look at the implications of that?
We have redesigned that. You still have similar problems on the south side too, right? Because you still have a slip lane on the south side. We do have a grocery on the north side, which is a destination, so it might be a little bit more convenient for the grocery. And as I said, I'm going to use annotate. We'll probably be doing something like this here that would allow this to be a full bus lane for several hundred feet north of West Washington.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that part I'm actually less worried about because, as you say, I mean, the bus will pull into the station, and yeah, I think that can be made to work. Okay. Go ahead.
Another thing we heard feedback on is the left turning vehicles onto South Park heading south. So from West Washington, we heard that there's just a lot of vehicles that make that turn really quickly. And it's kind of an unsafe crosswalk. So that I think was another part of why we looked at putting the station on the north side to kind of get, people away from necessarily having to navigate that specific southbound left turn onto South Park.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think that's a reasonable concern. Other trade-offs with retaining the parking. So right now, can you remind me what is the current configuration of this block? So you have a parking lane, which is all day, and it's a combined parking bike lane.
Yes. So for this section of Park Street, basically from Fish Hatchery to West Washington, we will not have the project budget to reconstruct this section. We will have to keep the curb faces basically where they are. To reconstruct that section of Park Street would add $25 million to the project budget, and our ridership and economic benefits don't support that level of additional funding, if you know what I mean. So basically, we're going to be able to change the character of Park Street, basically from Fish Hatchery to the south, and from Fish Hatchery to West Washington, we'll have to kind of maintain the existing roadway, much like we've maintained the existing roadway on Mineral Point Road or East Washington.
Okay. So yeah, because I mean, there are other issues on that block, like the sidewalks are very narrow, have utility poles in them, the combined parking bike lane is horrible, and all of that. All right. I think just one suggestion for the upcoming public input meetings, I think giving like how many parking spots you're actually saving with your design, how many parking spots are available in the side streets, and what that data that Liz, I think you mentioned on parking utilization. I think that will be helpful to also get input on these trade-offs from the people who will be affected by riding the bus. I think that's all I had. Thank you.
Harold, did you get enough of an answer with regard to the, before we go to Chris, did you get enough of an answer about the pedestrian crossing there? Because right now, I think that's of concern because it's a long crossing now, isn't it?
I think
will continue to be-
I think I got enough of an answer that yes, it's problematic, but so would be the option on the other side. And so maybe this is something that we can look at as we get closer to final design. I think I'm not concerned about moving the station location to that side of the intersection.
Good. Just wanted to make sure that was addressed. Sure.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
You bet. Chris, go ahead.
Thanks. First of all, this is exciting. I was happy to see it in the federal budget, so that's great. I will play off of that parking conversation. Most of my thoughts have already been sort of talked through already. I guess my bigger question is, since it's sort of still early to be figuring out the logistics of parking there, there's stuff that will still be worked through, like possible solutions to that parking that we haven't thought of, alternate parking in the area, maybe possible problems we haven't thought of, like maybe employees are using the parking when they could park a little farther away. Anyway, there's lots of things that we could figure out. So I'm wondering sort of the thought behind putting the parking in the plan, like saying at this point in the process that there will be parking preserved there. It's kind of a trade-off, right? Like on the one hand, you want to tell those folks we're thinking about you and get ahead of some of the pushback when we get closer to, needing to submit. On the other hand, it's kind of signaling that like we have already decided that we will preserve parking there. So how are you balancing that? And because I would like to not signal that it's all figured out yet. And yeah,
I think I guess oh my gosh, I should be a better speaker than I am. How did I get to be director? I don't know. I think we were extremely encouraged to see the funding recommendation in the budget, and the timetable for this is just extremely quick. We actually will begin construction in 27, right? Perhaps in 26. Liz, was it 26 and 27? Which means that we actually have to have a PS&E and start purchasing right away earlier than that. So basically, as fast as East-West has occurred, North-South has to occur probably 30 to 50% faster. And so if we had 5 years where we could go back and forth between committees and evaluate every little piece of the corridor and should we do this or that, well, we would have that liberty. But our designers and their schedule have themselves completing 30% design by, I think, the end of June. And yet we don't even really know what they're designing. And so that's where the ability to just have us, an LPA that provides perhaps more detail than is absolutely necessary in an LPA, but then also allows us to get to 30 and 60% design so we can do a plat and purchase right away. There's all these other things. And I think we know the issues about the parking. I'm just going to actually give a shout out to Liz. Liz has been very diligent meeting with all of these. We've done parking inventories 7 different times. We've looked at the side streets. The issues 18 months from now will be the same issues that we have today, and I think we just think we should just decide and move forward.
that was helpful. I don't think it was as clear how fast this is moving, which is great. but also presents those challenges.
Yeah.
Another question, actually. Well, actually, it's not a question. Just sort of thoughts on the airport situation. The access to the airport, especially from the east side, was one of the things I disliked most about the redesign. I live in Alder Martina Rutherford's district, and it's pretty bad connection to the airport now. But I understand why BRT at this point can't really serve it. It's going to require some buy-in from partners and stuff, and so I'm just kind of wondering if you're thinking more long term about that. Like, is there sort of an image in? I wish Mike was here, but in your all heads of like maybe something that runs from the airport coinciding with B for a bit and then running east to sort of make those connections and build out the network a little bit over the long term?
I wish Mike was here too, but Mike is up on the plane. When you look at the actual boardings of the airport, they're pretty modest. And Mike would say that most airports have very modest boardings. I think the exceptions would be some of your major ones, right? I was just in Chicago, right? And Chicago has a nice L line that goes to O'Hare. But most communities don't have that. And, the 30 to 50 boardings, what level of investment, $10 million, to serve those. That being said, right now we have routes that are relatively poor coverage routes, like Route L, right? And right now, Route L, I think, is at 90-minute frequency. If there were operating budget to play with, it would be nice to bring Route L to 30-minute frequency then, and then, that could be adjusted to maybe pick up the airport as well, right?
And if you guys don't mind me just chiming in on the ridership, because I just wanted to check the numbers. So there are about 120 boardings in that Dryden area right now. So there's two stops right now that serve that. So there's about 120 boardings in that area, whereas the airport right now has 18 per day. And then there's also an additional about 75 as you get further northwest on the rest of the B line. So I think we also looked at, I think there was a suggestion of maybe like you could go north and, west over and sort of skip the Dryden area. But I think that's really an important population to serve. And then also the same goes for the Kennedy area up on the further north side, just because there is such strong ridership there. So I think part of the argument that I've heard Mike make is like, we're kind of deciding between serving maybe some corporate folks that are going to the airport, people going on vacation, over people that are probably very dependent on the transit service that they have. And I mean, I use the B line a lot. I see a variety of diverse people getting on at those stops. I see a lot of students going to East High School. There's different, obviously, a variety of demographics that are riding that line. But I think I think that's kind of the argument is when you look at that ridership, it's really hard to say that we're going to kind of, we're going to actually subsidize the airport, or not subsidize, but we're going to prioritize the airport over kind of that really strong base of ridership that we have right now in that section.
Thanks. That boarding information is useful, kind of helps provide some perspective.
Sure. That's all you had then, Chris? Okay, Harold, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. In response to the tight timeline, I do want to make sure to ask or comment on the question of the side path along Park Street between Fish Hatchery and Badger. I think some of the feedback that you got, and something that I think the commenter mentioned, the difficulty of crossing Park Street, and the question whether there should be a facility on one side or if there should be a facility on both sides, with the trade-off, it sounds like, is the terrace width But did you do any further investigation of what would be required to have a widened sidewalk / multi-use path on both sides to avoid people having to cross back and forth?
We had a discussion on where it should be, on the east side or the west side, and there's more destinations, you might say, on the west side, between the library, Splash Park, all those destinations, and so we can really kind of fit it in one place or the other, unless we choose to have paved terraces. And that's really not consistent with what we've been hearing about, trying to make Park Street a nicer corridor rather than less nice corridor. So I guess that's probably not exactly everything that you'd like to hear, but
I think this might be another good thing to bring to a future engagement meeting, like show different cross sections, like, okay, this is what it would look like if we have a path on one side that allows us to have these trees, versus what would it look like if we had an 8-foot path on both sides? How narrow would the terraces be? Would there be viability for any trees? Just so people can actually envision what the two options look like. I think if you can do that, that would be helpful.
We might be able to provide a typical section. One thing we are doing is we could provide probably a typical section that shows that.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful. And also thinking about, is there something creative that can be done where you have trees where the path then narrows to whatever, 7 feet or stuff like that. And I mean, in principle, that's stuff down the road. But since you talked about the quick timeline, I am worried that we're locking ourselves in and not investigating those options.
Yeah, we have had to be relatively creative in, I'm going to say, space expanding. Because we on Park Street, we are fitting kind of 15 pounds into a 10-pound bag. We do have some 10% schematics that I think might be of interest to this committee, and we might be able to make those available so that literally every 100 feet we have kind of the idea of how this would cross a driveway, how this would cross, where there would be opportunity for trees, where there would not be opportunity for trees. And we might be able to post those on the website. I'll see if we can do that.
Okay, I think that would be helpful. And then
if I can just say, if you do post some additional things, just have Aiden send a link so that everybody knows that they're out there and can take a look. That would be great. Thanks.
Okay. And then one final question. Early on in the presentation, you mentioned the service plan for the North-South BRT. Is that part of the locally preferred alternative?
I think it's actually more of a description of the service that will be available. There are certain requirements that FTA has,
right,
for it to be considered BRT, and if we don't meet those service requirements, they let us know. And in fact, our initial service plan for the East-West line, Route A, we presented to them, and they were quite direct, saying this does not meet our definition of a BRT, and we had to adjust them so that it fit within their definition of BRT. And so I think that was not necessarily an option for us to decide on, but the FTA has this requirement for us to provide this level of service to receive the small starts funding that we'll be receiving.
Okay. All right. That's helpful because, I notice service cutting off at 11 p.m. on the weekend, having these half-hour service is not great. And so trying to get the best value that we can out of our BRT routes by having them run early, having them run late, having them run frequently, and making sure that, we're not locking. I mean, that's operational funding and all of that. But again, getting the best value out of our investment. All right, thanks.
Okay, thanks. Lots of great questions, lots of great discussion. Anybody have anything else with regard to the North-South BRT before we move along? Good discussion, more community interaction to come, and we'll be hearing some more about it. It sounds like in May.
That's right.
And everybody here is welcome to participate, right, Liz, in those sessions that are coming up?
Absolutely. Please do. And please share them amongst your networks as well.
Okay, great. Anything else? Okay, thanks very much. We're almost at 6:30, and I know Alder Herndon McKinney has to leave at 6:30. And I'm looking at our attendance, and as long as everybody else who's on will stay, we'll be at or above quorum. So I think we should be good, Alder Herndon McKinney, knowing you have to leave at 6:30. So
thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Okay. Hey, thanks much. And we'll look for great information, very important and exciting project, and we'll look forward to hearing more about it in the future. So next on the agenda is item 3, the Transportation 2023 Annual Report. Do we have any registrants on this item, Aiden?
We do not. The next one is
Okay.
item 4.
Item 4, okay. All right. So Tom?
Thank you. Let me pull it up. I thought I had it. All right, here we go. It's queued up and then I wasn't. Okay, here we are. Okay. Once a year, I'm required to give a report, kind of the status of the department, what we've been doing, and then also I've been using it to discuss some of the trends. It's kind of nice to take a step back and just see where are we and how are things changing. I start the report with the trend section. As far as traffic, we saw a dramatic decrease during the pandemic. We were hoping that perhaps that decrease would continue. However, I'm going to say probably on most of the state routes that are being measured right now, traffic is at or above the traffic levels that occurred pre-pandemic. I will say some of the routes that are serving our downtown employment, they've remained a little bit lower than what existed before the pandemic, particularly on East Washington. One thing also is where you can see on the graphic to the right, our peak periods were quite high prior to the pandemic, and they've become much more muted. So perhaps that's a better efficiency of the street space that we have. Also means that perhaps allocating lanes to bus rapid transit really will not create as much of an effect as people might think. If we look nationally at vehicle miles traveled, where it's our goal, within the Vision Zero document, is to reduce VMT. Nationally, VMT is back up and above where it was prior to the pandemic. We're at 102%. In Dane County, it also looks like we're about where VMT was prior to the pandemic. This is from Wisconsin DOT's methodology for measuring VMT. We've asked the Madison area MPO to provide VMT estimates for the city of Madison. They have been doing that using streetlight data, which is probe data. It was quite interesting for 2019, 2020, and 2021. However, streetlight changed their data collection methodology in 2022 from using, how do I want to call it, probe data from cell phones to connected vehicle data. So this shows that VMT within the city of Madison decreased in 2022, but I don't think we can really say that's the case because, our data source has changed their collection methodology. So we'll have to look to future years to see how our VMT has changed using that streetlight data. If we look at fatalities, 2023 was a poor year for fatalities. We had 17 fatal crashes with 18 fatalities. If you look at our 5-year rolling average from 2019, our 5-year rolling average is also going up. I wanted to say, well, how does that compare if we take out some of the state highways where we don't have jurisdictions, such as the Beltline and the interstate? And that shows the graphic on the right, and it still shows that our fatalities are up for 2023. So 2023 was a poor year. Part of the thing that we have to be careful about, and I put this in the report, is that, our sample size is rather small, right? So there's a certain amount of variability that occurs with a small sample size, right? And is the trend statistically significant or not? That's difficult to say with such a small sample size, but that also doesn't necessarily give us an out to say, well, what's going on and how can we change things? This particular trend has also occurred. This Transportation Alternatives was an organization in New York that really advocated for New York to become a Vision Zero city 10 years ago. And they produced a report that I think I put a link to in the operations report, saying lessons learned from 10 years in New York City. And so this gives a kind of a graph, a bar chart showing where their fatalities have gone over the last 10 years. You can see 21 was a high year. 22 and 23 were higher than 2019 and 2018. Their little report is really quite short, has 5 or 6 suggestions or considerations that I would encourage you, and I'm encouraging our staff to look at, because this is we want to get to zero, right? 18 is not good. We want to get to zero. We move on to Metro Transit. This is our total October passengers. And so in October, it was the first time since the pandemic that Metro ridership exceeded 1 million passengers per month. We're regularly hitting 1 million passengers per month since October. I think December was low, but like February, I believe, had 1 million passengers. We're still not at the 2019 levels, but we're kind of on the right trajectory. Bus rapid transit often attracts new riders, up to 10 to 15% new riders. So that will look good. The revenue hours also kind of got restored to what we had basically in 2019. And so that was a good level. They're just slightly above the revenue hours that we were servicing in 2019, but that's due to some increases in services by our partners and or a route added via council. But essentially, we have the same operating revenue hours as we had in 2019. We haven't increased it. We had the same amount. And then if you look at efficiency, right, which is the passengers per revenue hour, we increased our revenue hours by over 20%, I think, from 2022. And yet our passengers per revenue hour only went down by 1. 29 passengers per revenue hour, that's a very good, that's a good statistic. And that shows that we were able to increase service, but then our passengers kind of increased with it. And so our passengers per revenue hour essentially remain the same. So that's an efficient system. Our fare revenue was also up. It's not yet to 2019, but it's in the right direction. Some of this fare revenue has to do with contracts that we have, like, for instance, with our partners that use a rolling average. And so the low ridership associated with the COVID years kind of is depressing our fare collection right now, because it's a rolling average that we're billing our partners, some of our partners with. We anticipate that the fare revenue will continue to go up, perhaps about $1 million or so per year. Parking. Parking, I'm going to say, has, been greatly affected by the pandemic, and I think it's probably been permanently affected by the pandemic. If you look over by the by campus, parking occupancy has remained relatively stable. It was high during the weekday, and it was relatively high on the weekends. And you can see that 2019, 2022, and 2023, they're pretty much all the same. Conversely, if you look at the Wilson Street or the Judge Doyle Square, you can see that the garages near the Capitol have changed considerably. They once were mainly occupied during the weekday by employment, okay? Whereas now, employment parking is down, but the weekend, perhaps the weekend occupancy, for events and the like, which is shown right here, is up. So the customer base for our downtown garages around the square has changed from basically being employment-based to event-based, and supporting kind of the activities that occur downtown, rather than the employment that occurs downtown. So that's just kind of an interesting observation about our customer base, and I think this is probably a sustaining trend. This isn't like a short-term thing. I think this is maybe what it will look like in the future. If we look at our parking revenues, the top graphic shows how much parking has been made. I want to provide a note, and I think Stephanie is on board here too, so she can clarify. These 2 years are pandemic years, but the revenue is a little bit higher because we were able to capture some revenue from the property sales at Judge Doyle. So if we take away the operating cost associated with the parking division, and just take a look at the parking reserves, the surplus of the deficit generated from operations, you can see that we were in deficit mode in 2021, 20, and 2021. We made about $500,000 of revenue in 22 and full $1 million of revenue in 2023. That will probably be needed as we have to, we'll have to begin to support some of the debt that is incurred with the new State Street garage reconstruction. If we look at parking enforcement costs versus citation revenue, 23 is somewhat similar to 2022. Generally, our revenue exceeds our enforcement cost. The parking enforcement will become even more important as we implement bus rapid transit, and we need to make sure that our bus lanes are clear. Federal funding. I'm just going to say this table was so encouraging to create. I'm just going to say, for 4 or 5 years, we have worked so hard and chased so much federal funding, wondering if we were ever going to get it. And I think these last year or two has shown how much we have just gotten. $358 million. $358 million that basically is paying for improvements that we would have either had to pay for anyhow, like, for instance, the roofs on these facilities or the remodelings, we would have had to done that anyhow. Or it's paying for just taking our transit or system to the next level. Like, we could not have afforded bus rapid transit without this influx of federal funding. And yet, the infrastructure bill has given us all these things with a 70 to 80% match. So a one note I'm going to state is that this right here is still a recommendation. We've been recommended for funding right there, but that still requires appropriation by Congress. So now just a quick summary of what we've been working on. We've been implementing the East-West BRT and transportation. This is the largest project Madison has ever undertaken, $200 million, $75 million of infrastructure alone. We had our federal grant signing in November. You just saw the presentation for the North-South BRT LPA. I'm going to be honest, it's been difficult to move forward with the next project while right in the middle of the existing project. Mike Chikvala, a lot of people have worked a lot of evenings and weekends trying to keep us in line for the North-South project while, many things are going on the East-West project. We have been working with engineering to continue to help them with the transportation improvement program and prioritization. As you know, over the last 3 years, we've tried to make this less about pavement condition and more about our priorities. Jose has really been very good at developing routines, and I think those will be documented in a way for Transportation Commission approval soon. We've reinitiated the Amtrak station location study. Our public meeting, I think, had 450 different touches, either virtually or in person. We're getting ready to screen those, I believe it's 8 locations down to 2 or 3 locations to move forward with. Traffic engineering, the first Vision Zero progress report was issued. It was for 2022 data, which was better than 2023 data, unfortunately. And then Yang and Renee and Ali Heinrichs and all, they captured the Safe Streets for All grant. I believe it's $6.8 million. That will help us with the Safe Streets matter, just bread and butter projects that are asked for by our residents. This was an impressive graphic. Traffic engineering works hand in hand with city engineering on a lot of these street reconstruction projects. But in 2023, almost 6 miles of protected bike lane projects got opened. And I'm noticing it as I'm going around the city. Over on Wilson Street, the Atwood Avenue corridor. These are nice projects. We go to Metro Transit. We have the bus rapid transit, and so transportation staff are working hard on it, but Metro staff are working very hard on it. They have to train 350 drivers on how to drive a new type of bus. They have to come up with new training protocols and procedures for boarding on the left side of the bus rather than the right side of the bus. There's new charging procedures and infrastructure. And Mike Chikvala and their staff are also managing a lot of the construction of this. If that weren't enough, they did a once in every 25 year accomplishment. I think it was June 14th, where, June 13th, we had numbered, and June 14th, we had letters, and our whole transit system changed. A considerable effort. They're also, receiving 1 or 2 new buses a day of these electric buses that will serve our bus rapid transit. And they also, along with city engineering, and I just want to say city engineering helps us with so many of these projects. The remodeling of the Hanson Road facility so that they can store and charge our bus rapid transit buses. That groundbreaking was just, I think, about a month ago. Parking efforts, the resolution back in 2020 was that the parking enforcement officers were going to move fully into the parking division by 2023, and they did. The very last part of that plan was to relocate the parking enforcement officers out of the police district stations and move them to a centralized location. They did that. They now, reside in the town of Madison. That also required quite a bit of help from engineering to get that building ready. And then we hired our first transportation demand management coordinator and implemented that program. I think it was June 4th of this year, a brand new, program. And so, and then finally, I don't know if any of you have been by campus, but that reconstruction of the State Street campus parking facility has occurred. And that was kind of the product of 3 years of weekly meetings, considerable interaction between parking staff, our designer, the developer's designer. I'm going to say, again, engineering was quite helpful in this, as was economic development, Meklajewski's, and now it's happening, right? We are supposed to have our portion of the garage completed by January 30th, 2025. So that's very fast. This on the bottom is a schematic of what the eventual building will look like. And then up in the upper right is a rendering of what the intercity bus terminal will look like once this is completed. So that also is in, the Imagine Madison Comprehensive Plan. So just many of the initiatives in the Imagine Madison Comprehensive Plan have been implemented over the last 2 to 3 years it's kind of fun to see. So that's a summary of the report. Can answer questions or take comments.
Comments or questions for Tom? Very thorough and impressive report, Tom. A lot has happened, a lot's going on, and all very exciting, particularly the federal funding. That's unbelievably amazing.
Oh,
we couldn't be doing these things without that support.
Yeah.
Any other comments or questions from people? Okay, thanks so much, Tom.
I had just a comment.
Oh, sure. Go ahead, Robbie. Oh, I'm sorry. There's your hand. Go ahead.
So, of course, between the budget discussions that got a lot of press and, a lot of new projects going on, I know it's really difficult to get this out there to the public, but there's a lot of people who don't seem to understand the difference between an operating budget and a capital budget. And also the fact that we have gotten so many of these grants, and that so it's not entirely city money going out there. I don't know how to get that word out there, but I think it would be really helpful to both our efforts on transportation and the discussion of the city budget if we could get an article out there about that, so that people understand that BRT is not affecting the budget deficit in the operating budget, and that we got over $300 million, $300 million in federal money coming in for a lot of the projects that people see going on around the city. So I don't know how to do that, but I think it's something maybe the press office can work on or something. But
Yeah.
Thank you for the great report. It's very exciting.
Yep.
Any comments about how we can get the word out better about that?
Yeah, I think there is a lot of misinformation out there. Route A and Route B will exist with or without BRT, right? Those are the money that supports Route A and Route B are operating dollars, right? And they're supported through our normal budget. And so eliminating the improvements from the capital cost probably, if anything, might increase our costs because we'll need more buses to serve the same kind of route. You know what I mean? I agree. And there has been discussion on not necessarily, I want to put it, there has been some discussion on how do we provide information for the public to understand the difference between the operating costs and the capital cost. So.
Is that all you had then, Robbie?
Yes.
Yes.
I just
Okay.
wanted to make a comment. That's all.
Yeah, thanks. So your hand it sort of blended into the background of you there. So Bill, go ahead.
Thanks, Sam. Tom, could I ask a question as far as, it's great, all the things we've done in the last couple of years, but now that we have the electric buses starting to arrive, is there some discussion about, and we're getting drivers trained to start using them before the BRT is implemented next summer? But
Yeah, I think.
Are you going to get around, like with the university, as you had discussions with the university of using them on the 80 route and so forth?
Yes, actually,
To
there
take
is.
advantage of them?
Yeah. So we are thinking of doing an early deployment of some of those electric buses on Route 80, perhaps starting in June, to get the bugs out. We can't use them on, like, for instance, the Route A, because we need our endpoint chargers, right? However, Route 80 is a kind of a high ridership route, downtown, give our bus drivers the opportunity to practice, you might say. And we are partners with the UW-Madison and purchasing 16 extra electric buses to serve Route 80. And so it kind of directs the resources with our partner who is helping us purchase those buses.
Okay, thanks. Has there been any discussion with the university as far as alternative charging someplace on a campus street?
Yeah, we are looking at having an endpoint charger somewhere on campus. We won't be using, I think you had mentioned in pavement or had questioned.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
and I believe kind of our system is going to need to use the catenary charging system.
Okay.
But yes, there is there are discussions going on for that.
Good. Good. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Bill. Anybody else have any questions or comments for Tom? Again, impressive report, Tom. Thanks so much for preparing it and sharing it with us. One last ask for questions or comments? Okay, thanks so much. So we will move on to item 4, which is Danbury Beverly Doncaster reconstruction. I think Mario is going to do this for us. Now, I understand we do have people registered to speak. Is that correct, Aiden?
That is correct. Yeah.
Okay, so what we'll do is we'll have a presentation and then we'll hear from the public, and then we will have discussion and comments. And I would also encourage everybody, if you haven't had a chance to read the email that Aiden distributed from Darren. Darren was not able to be here because he had a work conflict, and was so disappointed because he's waited 2 years for this reconstruction and is very excited about it and very involved. So he wrote a detailed email and distributed to everybody. And Mario, if you didn't see that email, I'll ask Aiden to forward it to you as well, so that you can have an opportunity to see what Darren said. And he was basically supporting staff's recommendation of option A. So we'll let Mario go ahead, and then we'll hear from the public, and then we'll have discussion. And
All right, perfect. Thank you, Anne.
excuse me, Mario. Bill, did you have a question before we started?
Yeah, I didn't get Darren's email.
Aiden, could you send it to Bill again so he can see it?
Sure thing.
Okay, thanks. Alder Martinez Rutherford, did you not see it either?
Yeah, I was just going to say it's attached to the file, Legistar file, so you should also be able to get it there.
Okay, thank you so much. All right. Go ahead, Mario.
All right, thank you. So this is, as was mentioned, this is the Doncaster, Beverly, and Danbury reconstruction. So these are some local streets, sort of just by the Beltline, and the Arboretum is just to the northeast here. These are these are local streets. There is an exit off of the Beltline right here. It's actually really close to the next exit, which means a lot of people get off at the wrong exit, kind of turn around in this neighborhood. There's some through traffic on Doncaster, which is the street where your esteemed colleague lives. And so this project is mainly, there's some pavement deterioration and also some sanitary sewer that needs to be replaced. That's the main drivers of the project. While we're here, we're going to implement Complete Green Streets. So here's a little more context of the neighborhood. So it's about a 25 to 26 foot wide street, completely rural, no curb, no gutter, no sidewalk on either side for any of these streets. Along the entire project corridor, there's a lot of large mature trees in the terrace. This is a particularly difficult or troublesome spot of Doncaster, where they're quite close to the edge of the street, and makes it sort of difficult for us to design a sidewalk. But so this is a neighborhood yield street under Complete Green Streets. We're targeting a speed of 20 miles per hour or less. And we are trying to get a walkway in here, which is a high priority for this type of street. All right, so I'll go into this was the option we ended up recommending based on, survey results and, in engineering. So it is a 21-foot street width, which is narrower than the 24-foot width that is sort of the minimum with complete green streets. We are proposing sidewalk on one side of the street with this recommendation, and that is just to get these tree removals down. We really wanted this neighborhood has really great tree canopy. People really support that. We want to keep the green and complete green streets, and along with some road curvature of 2 to 6 feet to avoid these trees. We've sort of managed to keep the removals to a very small number, the anticipated removals. We think that the road curvature will also have traffic calming effects, just because of complexity added, along with the difficulty of passing on a 21-foot street. One other thing to mention about this design, and this is true for all of them, but this is the recommended option. They will have these short terraces, so they're 2.5 feet. That's 2 feet of, I guess it would be a planting strip. Sometimes it would be concrete in places, just between the sort of the roadway or the street and the sidewalk, and that's just to keep us within those, that tree canopy, keep us within that that footprint that we want to be in. So here's a couple examples of the curvature. So in some spots, we can kind of curve around the trees and back to support to clear out of the way of others. We worked with forestry to make sure that we have the proper distances from these trees. In some spots, to get that clearance, we needed to bring the sidewalk in to adjacent to the street. And in those spots, in some spots, we will be in one spot, we will be narrowing the street additionally and eliminating parking in a section, and bringing the street down in that section to, I think, 19.5 feet. Okay, so I'll just quickly run through the other options that were proposed. This option just has their normal 24-foot wide street width with complete green streets. I think it has some curvature, but less so because it wouldn't provide as much benefit. So this one is sort of the middle way. We called it with the standard width. And then our option C is sort of our standard street. I mean, albeit with the narrower terraces with the 24-foot street width and with sidewalk on both sides. And this one had a very high sort of estimated tree removal count. It's possible I could have gotten that down a little bit, in design, but it wouldn't have been much better. So just because of the way the trees are oriented in this neighborhood. And I think we also wouldn't get as many traffic calming effects. So I think the neighborhood was quite clear that there was a large, I think, vocal contingent that does not support sidewalks at all, and I think that is best represented by those who opposed option A. But there is a strong contingent. This is about 51% of people. 77 responses. That's pretty much the entire neighborhood. 51% did actively support option A. We had a can live with option. That was just under 20% here. But we did have an outright majority supporting option A, and engineering also supports that option. So just that is the one we are recommending for this reconstruction. And we are asking for just sort of your recommendation and approval, because we are going outside of the bounds of complete green streets just a bit, in terms of, first, the fact that we're doing sidewalk on one side. It is sort of the tree removal justification does not appear in Complete Green Streets. It says if right of way is constrained, you can do sidewalk on one side, but it does not say, to save trees, do sidewalk on one side. And then also our 21-foot street width is lower than the 24-foot, recommended minimum for this street type. So with that, I will open up the floor. Oh, right. Oh, I wanted to run through this as well. We have some of the main concerns of the neighborhood also in this survey. Speeding, access to safe walking routes, and cut-through traffic were the main concerns. And I think option A does the best in responding to all of these, except for maybe access to safe walking routes, which option C would be the ideal for. All right. With that, I will open things up for questions.
Okay, we're going to go to the registrants first, Mario, and then we'll go to comments or questions. So who do we have, Aiden?
So first we have Carol Bulow of Doncaster Drive. Neither supports nor opposes and wishes to speak.
Hi, everyone. My name is Carol Bulow. I live on Doncaster, very close to Seminole Highway, and I've been living here for about 50 years, believe it or not. And I think during that whole time, it's been pretty obvious that our street pavement was in pretty terrible condition. But the possibility of losing a lot of trees to do sidewalks was always an impediment to really pushing for new pavement. But having said that, I just want to state the most important thing tonight for me is to state that I really strongly support the option A as presented, and because it does give us a sidewalk on one side at least, and we lose the fewest number of trees. And I think, the plan, and I think it should work, is that a street that's a little bit narrower and slightly curved should slow down the traffic. And that was one reservation about getting new pavement, was that was only going to increase the amount of cut-through traffic and the speed of cut-through traffic. So I think this option is going to address that probably better than any of the others. And I want to thank my neighbor Darren for his work in supporting this. I'm sorry that he couldn't be here tonight. Maybe as an aside, I just want to say I shake my head at the fact that option C was even presented, because losing more than 55 trees in this project would pretty much destroy the beauty of the neighborhood and detract and take away from a lot of those benefits. If we're going to promote this complete green streets as a goal, sustainability had better be part of that. And so whether or not this design perfectly fits with the green streets standards, I think because it saves so many trees, I think it absolutely should be favored. And that's the most important thing I wanted to say, but I did also have a question about the timing and the process of when do we expect to see a final design, because what we have now, is sort of a concept. When do we see the final design or a proposed detailed design, and how much time will we have to look at that and comment before we start before it starts going through an approval process? Because to drag out an old saying, the devil is in the details. And until we see a lot of those details, it's hard to know whether we're going to be 100% in favor or whether we want something tweaked a little bit here or there. So those are my comments, and look forward to hearing what other people have to say.
Okay, thank you, Carol. And just a reminder that this is public testimony, so only the members of the commission and alders have the opportunity to ask staff questions that they need to answer. However, I'm sure Mario, unless a TC member or alder happens to ask that particular question, I'm sure Mario will be able to get in touch with you and provide you with the answers to that question about the timing. Or maybe a link to the website. Mario would show the project timing, et cetera. So did anybody on the commission or any alders have any questions for Carol? Okay, seeing no hands, thank you very much for your comments. And Darren did, although he wasn't able to attend, he did send a lengthy email, Carol, which did provide us with his feedback. So we do have that from him. And who do we have next, Aiden?
Do not wish to speak, but we have Maxwell Schweener of Beverly Road, neither supports nor opposes, and is available for questions. And Jackie Williams of Doncaster Drive opposes and does not wish to speak.
Okay. All right. So that's everybody who was registered and wished to speak on that topic?
Yep, for that item.
Okay. Thank you so much. And again, attendees don't have the opportunity to ask questions. That's really reserved for the members of the commission and other alders. So that's city protocol. Bill, go ahead.
Sure, I'll go ahead and ask the question. How far along or what's the time frame for this project after this evening? And when the final design plans will be ready?
Yeah, so the timeline for right now, I guess moving ahead to construction is we're planning on starting it sort of at the end of in the fall, just at the end of summer. Okay. And hopefully it will end in the spring. In terms of the approval process, I think in the next few weeks we're going to bring it to board, but before then we'll have a plan that shows kind of the horizontal layout for the public to see in the next couple weeks. And that's my goal right now. I think we have it pretty much set up. We just need to do a few more meetings to tie up some ends here.
Okay. So again, I'll do it kind of the question for her because I'm interested also, but I think I understand the process. So the next steps will be going to the Board of Public Works this summer with to get the approval to go out for bid for the project. Is that probably the time frame?
Yeah, so we're looking at a board meeting on April 17th.
Okay, so it is fairly tight time frame.
Fairly tight, yes.
Yep. Okay, thanks. Okay. I hope that helps the registrant know. So if they have some, and they will be notified, or they're about there's no right-of-way required for this project. Is that correct?
That's correct. We're staying well within the right-of-way.
Yeah. So, but there will be an opportunity to anybody that has an interest to go to the Board of Public Works.
Correct. And there's actually there's a bit of a longer delay between BPW and the Common Council for that cycle. So the Common Council meeting that we're going to is May 7th. So that's more opportunities for folks to give input.
Great. Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Bill. Harold, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I guess we often have difficult projects where there are big trade-offs between the options and there's disagreement in the public. I mean, this one seems relatively clear-cut in terms of option A, so that's great to hear. I want to commend you for considering actually having horizontal? Yes, like having the curvature in the road, not just to save trees, but also to potentially for the traffic calming aspect. And if that is the option that goes forward in the end, carefully thinking about what you can do in terms of data collection to see how much of a difference this actually makes. And then if we get a sense that in addition to the other measures that we're taking, this is actually an effective way to slow people driving down, then also considering that in scenarios where maybe there is no trees that need to be saved. I think that's something that we haven't used traditionally, like where all streets are dead straight. And I think I'm very curious what this is going to do. I'm optimistic that it will help with traffic calming. And so if we can somehow collect some before after data or comparison data between the roadway that's reconstructed straight and the other one that's not reconstructed straight, and doing those comparisons, I think that would be worthwhile. Thanks. That's all I have.
Yeah, great suggestion, Harold. Bill, go ahead.
Thanks, Sam. Since it's been under our review here the last couple of meetings, has this option A been presented to the fire department, fire marshal, and received their okay?
That is one of those meetings that we have to have. However, I do think that since these are all single family homes, from what we've heard, it should be.
They don't need the aerial equipment on any of these streets.
Right.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay. Other comments or questions? Mario, you indicated that since we are a bit outside of complete green streets in terms of the street width being less and the sidewalks only on one side, I get the sense that you would appreciate a motion from the Transportation Commission approving option A as the recommended approval. Would that be correct?
That would be correct.
Okay. Do we have a motion? Bill?
I'll make a motion for approval of option A.
Okay. Harold, is that a second?
That's a second.
Okay. There's a motion and a second to approve option A. Any discussion, or did you wish to speak to the motion, Bill?
I think it's a good, some very good work to come with that option A. I like that option A very much myself. So I hope we can do something like that in more streets in the future. Streets like that. Thanks.
Thanks, Bill. Any discussion with regard to the motion? Okay, I'm going to assume a unanimous consent vote unless anybody wishes to vote no or abstain. If so, please raise your hand. Okay, that motion is carried. And I would just say, Mario, that I think that's a very interesting and unique design. I think that having sidewalk on one side makes sense here. I think the goal and the way that you've designed saving trees is great. And I'm with Harold that the curvature of the street, if that does in fact work to slow traffic, I think that's great and something that we can consider as another tool to use in traffic calming, because we've sure seen the wide open straightaways that we have, and we heard from the police department, we heard from Lieutenant Hanna last time around what that's causing in terms of speeding. So we'll be interested to hear what you have to say, because with the cut through, Mario, it sounds like you have a lot of traffic heading through.
Yeah, on Doncaster, that's Beverly less so, but on Doncaster, that is sort of a cut through route. So
yeah. So Harold, maybe they can gather some traffic data now, and then after the reconstruction, look again. Mario, does that seem reasonable?
I think that does seem reasonable. And I'm getting some stuff from traffic engineering. Looks like they think it's reasonable too.
Okay. All right. So this is one that we've talked a lot about, understanding the impact of the improvements in terms of traffic safety and reducing speeding, et cetera. So this will be a good one for us to maybe hear back from you about at some point in the future, Mario, or from traffic engineering, or for, wherever that would be the best to hear back from.
Yeah, I'll just jump in. Yeah, I think, these kind of newer things that we're doing, be interesting to kind of set that up to see the impacts, because I think this could be a good one to have in our toolbox in the future if we're seeing success.
Yeah, that sounds great. And congratulations, by the way, Renee. We were all very happy to hear about your promotion. Any other comments or questions? Okay. Thanks so much, Mario. Move on to item 5. Do we have anybody registered to speak on this one, Aiden?
This is item 7.
I beg your pardon?
We do not. The next person registered is for item 7.
Item 7. Okay. All right. Thanks so much. And Nishali, are you doing item 5?
Yes.
Did I say your name correctly?
It's more pronounced Nashali.
Nashali. Thank you very much. Go ahead.
Okay. Let me present.
And I'm sorry for mispronouncing it.
Oh, it's no problem. I know it can be tricky sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. This is a exhibit for a bike path that is going to be located on Northeast Park, with its limits being Tanshaw Drive to connect with the underpass 151. In the park, we have wetlands and a retention pond, but we're going to be avoiding it with the design. It's going to be a 10-foot bike path. We're going to have 2 removal of trees and some wooden areas. In the park, we already have some bike path assistance. We have the Goodman that connects also with the underpass, and we have a cyclocross mountain bike trail and 2 public and private paths that are allowed biking. We are going to be staying close to the right-of-way to give area and room to the park for future development and activities. Also, we're going to be using a 10-foot easement that is going to be along the right-of-way of Barrington 4th. Path lighting is going to be added. There's going to be mostly to the north of the path, but on the area for Barrington North is going to be in the south to avoid backlight to the apartments in the area. And we're going to also be improving the crossings at Tanshaw Drive.
Okay, comments or questions? Anybody have any comments or questions? Harold, go ahead.
Yeah, can you remind me? Oh no, I guess I already. So it's in the town of Burke. It borders Sun Prairie. What's the maintenance going to look like for this path?
I could probably help with that, naturally. So this is kind of a weird situation where the city of Madison owns that property in a different jurisdiction. So it would be the city of Madison maintaining it. It's a very kind of unique situation right there.
Okay.
So it is City of Madison Parks land, even though it's not technically all within the City of Madison.
Okay. And at the end of it, like the path that it connects to in the northeast, that's on Prairie?
That is Sun Prairie's path, yes.
Okay. Right. Thank you.
Hey, other comments or questions? Okay, sounds like everybody thinks it looks good, unless anybody has any other comments for you. Okay, great. Thanks so much.
Oh, thank you.
You bet. Next, we have item 6, which is Pheasant Branch Creek Path. Erin, are you doing that one?
Yes, that will be me.
Okay.
Share my screen. All right. So on the far west side of town, west of the Beltline, in the business park area around Deming Way, Furrier Drive, and Excelsior Drive, we have an existing stormwater basin, and as recommended from a recent watershed study in this area, this area experienced really bad flooding in 2018, and the Pheasant Branch watershed, I don't think I need to reiterate for the group, but the city's been doing some pretty big watershed modeling for all the sub watersheds throughout the city, focusing on the ones that are really prone to flooding, and this is one of the first and foremost. And so now, with the watershed modeling done, we have some projects coming downstream of that, of improvements that are going to help overall flooding and conveyance in the whole watershed. So this is one of them, improving stormwater detention in this business park detention pond area. And the reason we're bringing it to the Transportation Commission is, along with the pond work, we're going to be sort of reconfiguring and installing a multi-use path that's detailed here, shown in the blue hatching. So right now there's some paths within this pond area, largely used by the adjacent business parks around it. And so we're kind of regrading, much of the whole area, largely to increase our stormwater capacity, and putting in a bit more of a proper city-maintained 10-foot wide path. This is going to be on the east side of the ponds. We're going to include a new 14-foot wide bridge right here. There's also going to be a new path connection that doesn't exist today to Furrier Drive to the east here. And then routing all the way to Deming Way to the north. And then working with individual property owners in the adjacent businesses to get them connected to this new multi-use path. There's kind of a mix of private-public paths today. I will note there are some existing crossings that exist today that will be removed for the pond work and the stormwater capacity upsizing that's required. And we are working with adjacent businesses on the west side here to maintain what they have for paths that are more in the private side, but trying to keep a loop around this pond that exists today, and have something that's going to be more functional in the realm of all ages and abilities bike network. So that pretty much summarizes the path. Looking for any comments from the commission.
Harold, go ahead.
Yeah, for the benefit of the commission and the public, do you happen to have a slide that shows this path in a wider context, like how it fits into the network of bike connections on this side of town?
Yeah, that is we don't have anything specific from this project. The all ages and abilities bike map, which we're in the works of getting that, into a more usable GIS function, shows a route going north-south along Furrier Drive. So this would be either secondary or in place of that biking route, potentially preferred, as it would be off-street in a fully functional multi-use path. I don't have much beyond Google Maps and what you can tell from that.
All right. Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, I can jump in too. I mean, it's a business park, so it is a little bit of a circuitous area to ride through. But we have been thinking about how this would fit into a larger plan. To get more off-street connections in this area. I mean, the stuff out there right now is a mix of mostly moderate to high-stress streets. So we have been taking a look at how this can kind of create a starting place for something also something that's a little bit more efficient for traveling through this business park because it's not laid out in a very efficient way if you're on a bike right now.
Okay, yeah, thanks. That's helpful. I mean, I know North and like Middleton has a bunch of off-street paths, but they're not quite connected. But we're getting closer to that, so that all makes sense. Thanks.
Other comments or questions? I'm seeing no hands, Aaron and Renee. Anybody have any other comments or questions? Okay. Thanks very much.
And I think I might be the next item as well.
Okay. So this would be the Ped Bike Bridge at Herminus Street. And it's my understanding we do have somebody registered to speak on this item. Is that correct, Aiden?
That is correct.
I'm sorry?
Yep, that's correct.
Okay. So we'll hear from Aaron and then we'll hear from the public and then we'll have comments and questions.
Okay. So next up, we've got a project that includes two things. We've got a somewhat standard reconstruction project on Herminus Street and Union Street on the east side, reconstructing those streets between North Marquette and Clyde Gallagher Ave. This just west of the Starkweather Creek. And then with this project, we are also looking to accomplish a somewhat of a long time neighborhood goal of getting a bike ped connection over the Starkweather Creek, right at just about Herminus Street, the street end. This bridge is in the Darbo neighborhood plan, and it was also a strong recommendation from the adjacent Darbo Worthington NRT group, city engagement with folks in that area. Hearing definitely from kids in the area looking to especially access the library off East Wash, so improving that east-west connection without having to go around Milwaukee Street or to the north towards East Washington. So just an overview on first the street reconstruction project. Right now, Herminus Street and Union, curb and gutter, sidewalk on both sides, redoing the sanitary sewer and storm sewer. And then another big component with the reconstruction is there's pretty good existing canopy, particularly on Hermina. It's quite a narrow street today. It's actually 24 foot face to face with parking full time on the north side, and then parking on the south side allowed only overnight. Somewhat of an unusual parking situation. And the existing terraces are too small for the tree canopy that's out there. So it's a recommendation from forestry that would really help if we could give some more terrace room there and do 1 foot narrowing on either side. So we proposed dropping the street of Hermina to 22 feet face to face and removing the nighttime parking on the south side. So going to full-time one-side parking just on that north side. Increasing the terrace even by a foot really helps protect tree roots during construction and also promotes growth after construction. And then on Union Street, a little bit more typical today is currently 28 feet face to face, parking on both sides. Similar situation of constricted trees in tight terraces, even tighter terraces on Union Street. So we also proposed narrowing 1 foot, going to a 26 foot wide street, going to parking just on one side. Again, giving those trees some more breathing room, and helping to promote future plantings that forestry expects on Union Street. I'll also mention for Union some small bump outs at Marquette to provide that gateway treatment. And then, I will also mention for Union Street, sidewalk on both sides, 26 foot wide street with parking on one side is pretty right in the middle of what Complete Green Streets recommends. Herminus Street would be a variance on Complete Green Streets in terms of street width. Came up with Doncaster, 24 feet is the the recommended minimum for parking one side. So we would have a variance here on complete green streets going to 22 feet parking on one side. And to help accommodate that with this street and any others where we have this variance, we're taking a closer look at driveway aprons, particularly on the non-parking side of the street. Because if you can kind of imagine, if you're exiting or leaving your driveway, you can easily be blocked in a tight street by cars on the opposite side. So on the non-parking side, taking a close look and making sure there's maybe a little extra driveway room there to make those movements more manageable. And then moving on to the bridge, kind of the more unique part of this project. We've got a 12-foot wide steel truss prefab bridge. This would be similar to, what we just put in on Atwood or the Garver bridges. It would be connecting from the Starkweather Creek path north of Hermina, crossing perpendicular over the creek. And then because we need to get the bridge high enough to meet clearances over the waterway, it requires us to get this bridge high enough. And then there's a ramp down section on the east side, spilling out onto Clyde Gallagher, lining up with the existing sidewalk on the north side of Hermina Street. That ramp section would be 10 foot wide. There would be railings and walls required on either side of it, kind of laid out here. That's about a 50-foot long ramp down section. A couple tree removals in order to construct that ramp section, a 5-inch and an 8-inch hackberry along the creek here. And it's a pretty tight situation. The creek is, it's quite small, and having to meet that minimum clearance, this is about as tight as we can make this bridge and the ramp down situation work while still getting the clearances that we need. Wouldn't want to go more narrow than 12 feet on this bridge. 14 is usually a preferred for multi-use path. In this case, the width constriction is really going to be that ramped section, the 10-foot ramp section. So having a slightly narrower bridge gives us a little bit more flexibility with the overall bridge footing and abutment placement. And I'll also mention we are talking to our friends at B-Cycle about getting in a new station right on the adjacent to the Starkweather path. This was super popular with the neighborhood when we had a public meeting. So yeah, Renee and I are talking to B-Cycle folks about including that with this project. And one other thing I will mention, overall timing. The bridge itself is going to require some additional federal permitting because it's crossing a floodway. So we actually have to do some FEMA permitting for that. That is going to be a little bit of a process. So the bridge is going to be likely constructed in 2025, while the construction project for the road work, the sewer work, street replacement on Hermina and Union is expected for this summer, fall. And then I'll also just add for the street narrowing on Hermina and Union, we did pose a question in a questionnaire to folks. Got some pretty good feedback. On Union Street, when asked if folks would support narrowing to create wider terrace, promote tree health and growth, if it required removing parking on one side. We had 21 total responses, about 60% supporting it, 40% opposing. And then on Union Street, similar question, narrowing, helping trees, removing parking on one side, overnight going to full-time one-side parking. We had 20 responses, 80% supporting, and 20% for respondents opposing. Yeah, I think that sums up the presentation. So to be clear, looking for a input and approval from the Transportation Commission on the variance for Hermina Street, and then also looking for input and approval on the bridge layout.
Okay, before we go to comments or questions, let's hear from the public.
So first we have Mary Carbine of Hermina Street opposes and wishes to speak.
Hi, this is Mary Carbine. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. Okay, thanks for the opportunity to speak. And I just wanted to note that my comments will pertain only to the bridge. And I also sent an email to the commission, and I hope that everybody had a chance to see that. Can I confirm that that was distributed?
Aiden?
We saw it.
Okay, thank you. So I've lived on Hermina about 20 years, and I regularly walk and bike the neighborhood. And my letter, I did want to say that my letter referenced a 14-foot wide bridge with a 65-foot long ramp up, which I don't know if Aaron mentioned was that those were the dimensions that were presented to us in the March neighborhood meeting. And since then, it seems like in response to concerns from me and others at the meeting about the scale and impact of the bridge, that the bridge has been scaled back, which I appreciate, in reducing the ramp up. But I still want to express my concerns about this. I am still concerned about the amount of pavement and paving over of native plantings and in a watershed of greatest concern. I mean, this is why you'd have to get additional permission from FEMA to impact this waterway. And I don't, as a member of the neighborhood, my understanding is what was desired or suggested for the bridge was a much smaller one, a more pedestrian scale one, not something this large. And I think the size and amount of paving of the bridge surprised folks in the neighborhood meeting. I don't think that that's what was envisioned. I also don't see a major benefit to connectivity. It is literally a 3-minute walk or a 1-minute bike from bridges on either side. I don't agree that there's difficulty getting to the library. I walk it all the time. I did so today. And I use all neighborhood streets, the Darbo Bridge. It took me 12 minutes to get to the library. And I did not have to walk on East Washington. So, and the majority, the highest density of housing and of children that I observe in the neighborhood from living there and walking in it every day is closer to the existing bridge. So I feel like something that is sort of a convenience or an amenity is being turned into a need. And I don't think there's really a need. And I do understand the difference between a capital and operating budget. And even though this is in the capital budget, it doesn't mean we have to spend the money and the resources on it. So I appreciate some of the attention paid to the redesign, but I still, as a member of the neighborhood, I oppose the bridge. Thank you.
Looks like Anne may have froze, so I'll jump in a second if needed. Let's see if she comes back. Aiden, is there anyone else?
There is one more person registered.
Let's hear them.
Sure. So next is Lance Green of Dixon Street. Neither supports nor opposes. And they're representing the Friends of Starkweather Creek.
Well, hello. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello? Oh, excellent. Yeah, this is Lance Green. I'm the co-chair of the Friends of Starkweather Creek. And actually, I've been monitoring the creek from the spot right there by the sanitary lift station for the last 9 years. So I'm real familiar with this area. and we've worked with the city a lot. This whole ditch was redug and relined in 2008, and there's been a lot of work to restore the native vegetations along the sides and plant some trees. Our concerns were, as Mary said, to some degree, loss of habitat and the native vegetation and some trees. The footprint and the runoff of all of this impermeable surfacing, and making sure that people can still canoe under it. Well, today I went down and talked with Aaron in engineering, and he was really, really receptive to and responsive to the things that we were talking about. I see that there's a reduced size of the bridge and the ramp, which we appreciate that. There's certainly no need for anything larger than this. And I understand that the width, the 10-foot and the 12-foot are kind of minimal for being able to clear the snow. So I guess I understand that couldn't go much smaller. And Aaron said, well, they can look into possibly replanting any trees that are removed, because those are not very big or old there. And the vegetation assured me that the vegetation will be restored on any disturbed land, and Friends of Starkweather can certainly assist or advise on that issue. So basically, the Friends of Starkweather is not opposing the new bridge. We see that it's going to be a good amendment and desired by the neighborhood. Maybe, in these budget times, it seems like a little bit excessive, considering, we've got a less than a block walk north or south to get across the creek. But if it's going to be good for the neighborhood and they would like it, I think that's an appropriate reason to put it in. And I guess it fits in the capital budget. So thank you very much. If you have any questions, it's free to ask those.
Okay, does anybody have any questions for the registrant? Sorry, I got booted off my laptop and I had to go onto my iPad here, so. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Anybody have any comments or questions? Chris, did you have something? No? Okay. I'm going to try and get back on my laptop here so I can manage the meeting better. Do we have anybody else registered to speak, Aiden?
The last registrant
Doesn't wish to speak, but we have Scott Leifker of Union Street, registered opposing and does not wish to speak.
Okay. All right, so comments or questions from the group? And I am not seeing hands here, sorry. Aaron, if you could close I'm trying to get back into the meeting. Okay, now I'm seeing you all. Sorry about that. Bill, go ahead.
Thanks, Sam. Aaron, what you say you do need a federal permit for that, but that's not from FEMA. Who is that, from the Corps of Engineers?
It is actually a FEMA permit, and that is just because the Starkweather Creek is considered floodway. So anytime you
Gotcha. Okay.
anytime you fill anything in a floodway, even like minuscule amounts, this is a very small amount of fill. It's like a bridge footing. It's quite small, but just because of that, it is in the floodway. It triggered that.
So you don't need to go to the Corps. You just need FEMA then.
Yep. And it's a process, but it should be relatively standard fare.
Okay, thank you.
Carl, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. So with the reduced width and the 90-degree angle from the ramp to the bridge, I'm trying to get a sense of like people turning and the visibility with the railings, just making sure that we're not tightening things too much here.
Yep. I think sorry, I was looking to reshare. Do you see the exhibit?
We do.
Okay. Yeah, so it is tight, and we're definitely aware of that. And we want it to be multi-use and usable by bikers. The 10-foot ramp up section is, because we have to get up, we've got a wall on either side, so we need a minimum clearance off of the back of curb on Clyde Gallagher, as well as some offset from the riprap along the creek bank there. So we really can't go any wider than 10 feet here. A little bit of a widening out on the turn, and we'll certainly look to, have a railing there that isn't going to be too impactful. Serve what it needs to without being too overkill. I think that a benefit of this design, in addition to it allows you to get up to the clearance that is required to even construct the bridge, is that you're coming into the path, which is the busier facility, at a 90-degree angle, and you are kind of sloping down as you're coming across the bridge. So, I think staff was prioritizing that 90-degree angle into Starkweather path, even if it required sort of that slower turning movement. We had looked at sort of a skewed bridge that does reduce your clearance, but then you'd be coming in at an angle to the path, and that seemed less preferred. It also does have some more impact to the creek bank itself.
Okay, thanks. That, I think, answers my question. Should be fine.
Okay, other comments or questions? And again, I apologize for getting something weird happened with my laptop there. Did everybody get an opportunity to ask questions of the registrants that they wanted to ask? Anybody have anything that they didn't have an opportunity to ask? Okay, other comments or questions for Aaron? Okay, Aaron, it looks like you're looking for a motion to approve the recommended proposed design, including the complete green streets variance on Hermina Street. Is that right?
Yep, as well as the proposed bridge layout.
Okay, I was including that in the design, but we can add that proposed. So what we're looking for is a motion to approve the recommended proposed design, including the complete green streets variance on Hermina Street and the proposed bridge layout. Harold?
So moved.
Okay, that is a motion. Robbie, is that a second?
That is a second.
Okay, did you wish to speak to your motion, Harold?
Just very, very briefly, given that we already had 2 variances from complete green streets, just keeping track of this going forward, to get a sense of, like, if we see a pattern where we constantly get these requests to design narrower streets, then maybe that's a sign that we should revisit some of the guidance in the complete green streets guide. I mean, these seem great projects that make a lot of sense with the narrower cross sections. So just something to keep track of. Thanks.
Yeah, Renee, I know you probably are keeping track of those. But just like with the fire access, where we had to deal with that, we're running into some interesting things. And I think that's why we're looking to have some time before we bring it back to us. Is that right, Renee?
Yeah, that's why we set it up to come back in 18 months so that we could kind of get a feel for these little things. So definitely keeping a list. And that 18 months will be coming up sometime after the 30th of June. So we will be coming back to make some tweaks.
Okay, great. So discussion, thanks, Renee. Discussion on the motion. Okay, I'm seeing no hands. I'm going to assume a unanimous consent vote unless anybody wishes to vote no or abstain. If so, please raise your hand. Okay, seeing none, thanks very much.
Thank you.
You bet. All right, so next we have the 2025 budget outlook and discussion for the Department of Transportation. Tom?
Yeah, this will just be a little bit of a discussion, and it won't necessarily be presented materials. And we already somewhat touched on it at the very beginning. I think there is confusion over what's an operating expense and a capital expense. And I think we need to, as a city and as departments, need to understand a better way to communicate that and just educate, this type of expense affects this portion of your property bill, and this type of expense is subject to the levy limits and affects a different part. And then the second thing that I think is more of a general statement in that I think over the years we've added quite a few programs, Safe Streets Madison, Vision Zero, and oftentimes we've had to do kind of the same amount or more with, similar sets of money. And I think we've been pretty good at trimming around the edges. Like I think Yang at one time, our pavement markings used to occur every year, right? Well, now they occur every 3 years, right? And so we've looked for ways to capture efficiencies. Parking, for instance, is sharing staff with streets for parking enforcement officers and the like. I think with this budget, based on the council's, the council, I think is given the guidance to look for efficiencies, which we will continue to do, as well as plan on asking our citizens, our community members, if they would like a referendum, and for the additional funds. I think what will end up happening is that we will have to define specific services that will be able to continue with a referendum, but we will have to put on hold without the referendum. I think sometimes we've been able to absorb things and still keep many services going, even though maybe they're not going as fast as we want, right? And I think with this budget, we will try and provide more definition so that, it just provides a clear picture for voters that if the referendum continues, and we will be able to continue with these services, and if the referendum is not passed, then we will probably scale back on these particular service categories. And so for Metro, perhaps that might be a route, for instance. For traffic engineering, I'll let, Yang and his management staff determine, which service is probably the most, all of our services are priorities, but if one had to go, what would that service be that would have to go? And so I think that's probably fair to the voters, just, so that they understand yes and no. And I think it's also fair to the staff, rather than saying, well, you're going to do the same amount, but you're going to do it with less people and less funding. And that, that never really happens. Something has to go. And so I think we're going to be more diligent in just providing definition to the services and how they will affect the operating budget.
Hey, comments or questions? I know we don't have anybody from Metro here, but Stephanie's here and Yang's here, so I don't know if you have any other comments about your areas of the budget. It's challenging. Carl, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. One question I have, in your report, you talked about how successful the city has been in getting federal funding. And I presume that that success comes from a lot of work that staff have put in. And I think as part of the budget discussions, we have seen $27 million, that would mean if we were to reduce staff expenses that might mean a cut either in salary or a cut in staff positions or not filling vacancies, which then I assume in turn means we might not continue this success story of applying for grants, planning for grants, having enough projects in the pipeline to benefit from this federal and state money. Is that an accurate description?
Perhaps. I think our capacity to pursue grants would be different, right? You know, we've and then our capacity to pursue federal grants would be diminished. When we work on a capital project, we try and bill our time towards the capital project, right? So, so that the full costs of that capital project are realized, right? So let's say, like when I work on the BRT, I bill my time to the BRT so that project fully reflects, you know, our staff time, all right, as well as our consultant and contractor time. Other programs, though, are more operations oriented. Like, for instance, Vision Zero. There isn't necessarily a capital program associated with Vision Zero, right? So much of that staff time is built to the operating budget, right? Similar for, you know, I don't want to speak for Yang, but striping, you know, that's an operating cost, right? I doubt that we can spread out our streets pavement marking the 5 years, yeah, but so that's yeah, I think Yang will have to work with his management staff to understand, you know, what service program would have to be reduced, right? To if his operating budget was reduced, and you know, he would bring that before you know, policymakers such as yourself, but also the mayor. Metro Transit, I think, is a little bit more straightforward in that, you know, there are routes with high ridership and routes with low ridership, right? And probably if some of their operating funds were removed, they would either look at span of service hours or some of the routes, right?
Yeah.
So I didn't really give you an answer. I'm sorry, I didn't give you an answer, but I tried to.
Yeah, I think you gave me an answer, and I mean, this I think also shows that, I mean, it's tricky, the distinction between operating and capital in some of these cases where, like, yeah, anyway. And then the other question I have, I mean, there is the expense side of things. In the realm of transportation, what is there on the revenue side? Increasing fees. I remember we had a discussion about a residential parking permit program that there are limits on that, but I think we were not at the limit. Vehicle registration fee is another one. Parking revenue. What can you speak to that at all?
Yeah, I'll say that the parking division's maybe in a little bit different category in that they're an enterprise agency that roughly their revenues exceed their expenditures. And so that, and we have Stephanie, who's been our parking manager now for a year. She's very good. She's very creative. She's doing some good things in the division. I'm confident that, you know, she will manage the resources that the city has entrusted to her and kind of get those books to work. You know, I'm for Metro Transit, you know, 3/4 of Metro Transit's budget is based on fares or contributions from the state, federal government, as well as partners. So, roughly a quarter is based on the city, right? And so any increase or decrease in the city's contribution is kind of proportionate and affects that 1/4 of their funding sources. The other 3/4 are through other factors. Transportation and traffic engineering are primarily operating budget, fully funded. There is a possibility of looking at a transportation special charge that has been brought up at the council meetings, and we've also done some preliminary discussions on that or analysis on that and what that would bring in. I think, I believe the council is looking at perhaps multi-year solutions rather than a single-year solution. So they have kind of a menu of options, right? And some would be to increase our existing special charge, or add a special charge, or do a referendum, or reduce services, right? And so I think the council and the finance department are looking at a strategy that perhaps uses all of those kind of in a planned sequence, so that, I don't know if a planned sequence, but provides multi-year solutions rather than having a crisis every year. Do you see what I'm saying? And so the decision makers, the policy makers, will be looking at that strategy just to provide, I think it helps the citizens, the city workers, everyone, if we kind of understand what the next 3 years looks like, and how budget challenges will be addressed over a 3-year period rather than having to address a major challenge every single year.
Thank you.
It is challenging. Yang, Stephanie, did you have anything that you wanted to add? I do have a question, but I'd love to hear from you and then hear from other people first.
Yeah, thank you. So I don't have much to add. I think Tom covered really well. But I just want to point out that, I feel like, it has been very difficult in the last few years when we were asked to, come up with a 5% cut. I think definitely going to be, I cannot speak for, other state agencies, but I assume it's going to be similar. But, for traffic engineering, it has been really hard to, to do that. It's going to be, very hard to, for the, when we develop a 2025 budget, in case a referendum does not pass. I think for that, I think there's also a lot of value, for us to work together, for a staff, for the appointed officials like you and elected officials like the council, to work together to be transparent and, bring the options, to our residents, to the voters, and let them know, the value of the city services, and the cost of maintaining this, and also the other costs of cutting these services, the cost in terms of benefits, provided to them. So definitely going to be. I agree with everyone. It's going to be a huge challenge. But I think we'll be we're prepared to work on those. So thank you.
Thanks, Yang. Stephanie, did you have anything to add?
Just for the parking, we are different in our parking budget. My goal is, we continue to look at all of our current fees, and we are reviewing everything right now. So I will have probably a lot to bring to Transportation Commission this year. The more that we identify areas where it definitely needs to be reviewed. And our goal is to just continue to build our reserves back up, so we can maintain our garages, build new garages, and just keep our operations going without having to borrow money. That's our end goal.
Okay. I had a question that came to mind based on what Harold was talking about with regard to the federal and state grants that we've been so successful in achieving. I know I've heard from the Madison Metro folks how much work it is to show that you are in compliance with the grants that you have received. And I'm curious if that, like you were talking about, Tom, can those efforts be billed back to the project, to the grant as well, or not? Because, Harold, that's an ongoing, just like the maintenance we've talked about for some of the improvements, showing you're in compliance with federal grants is something we're federal in particular, and I assume state as well, is that we're required to do to show we've used the money how we were supposed to use the money or whatever. So if those efforts can't be billed back to the project, then those would be, I assume, an operating expense that we would have to bear as a result of accepting those grants or taking on future grants.
Yeah, I think generally we should be billing project cost to projects, right? We do not have to accept these federal grants,
right?
But when someone's willing to give you 80 cents for your 20 cents,
why not?
It's hard to walk away from that.
Mm-hmm.
So if you think about it, we have a new BRT system, right? But then we also have 62 new battery electric buses that if, the Bus Rapid Transit project hadn't purchased those, we would have had to purchase those replacements, right? Because we try and replace our buses every 12 to 15 years. And so you see how, in some ways, capturing, this federal capital funds helps us maintain our system with federal money rather than local money. Like the roof on, 31 or 1101 East Washington, the bus barn, that was paid for, I believe, with federal money that otherwise would have had to be in city capital money. So generally, if we can capture federal funds, with a 20 or 30% local match, it's to the city's benefit.
Right. No, I agree. But my question, I recognize, Yang, I've heard you talk about the effort that goes into applying for and obtaining the grants. So I'm assuming that can be charged to a project, but can the compliance, can that be charged to the project? And can the compliance with the grant be charged to the project, or do you have to, does that go as operating expense? So just something to think about, because it clearly is a value to have the federal money coming in. But just as you were talking about the value, Yang, we spend money in terms of time and effort to apply for and get those grant monies. And then we have to spend money to have people make sure we're in compliance with those grants, because that, I'm assuming almost all of them, I would assume all of them require you to show them that you're in compliance. So, Yang, I've heard you talk a lot about the time that's involved in that process.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, I think generally speaking, the time we spent on reporting the progress and monitoring compliance, those can probably generally be billed to the project. However, the efforts that we spend pursuing the grants, developing the application and develop agreement, like Renee is doing right now for FSS4A, and actually it's taken me like over a year to develop that agreement. And hopefully we're a lot faster since we already some experience on that. Those generally would not be able to captured. Okay. So until agreement is in place, until the funding is in place, they will not cover all the front end cost, and that could be substantial, especially with some of the discretionary grants that from USDOT. There's a lot of competition and a lot of you have developed a very strong application, to be selected. So, yeah. So you are definitely right. I think so hopefully we can still find some resources to support that effort. As Tom mentioned, that when you put in 10 cents, 20 cents, 30 cents, you get $1 back. That's definitely a good deal for our community, especially most of the projects are something that the city is going to do anyways someday, and maybe sometime actually already city already doing anyways. So like right now we're looking into a couple of projects that's already programmed in our using city funds, but now some opportunities come up, so we're trying to actually get federal funds to pay for those projects. So I hope that no matter what happens, we are smart enough to preserve some capacity for staff to do so. And we also saw some other communities that they're kind of hesitant to go after these grants because they either don't have resources or because of other constraints that they may not be motivated to go after those grants. So I think hopefully we can learn from our experience and others' experience. Be mindful as we go through this challenging process.
Sure. And so that's just a reminder that as Harold was, talking about that slide that you showed, Tom, over 350 million of grants that have been achieved, that, as Yang mentioned, there was an investment of operating costs at the front end in order to obtain those grants. So just to remind people of that fact, a bit of a mix between the operating and the capital budgets. Chris, go ahead.
Thanks. I have a small and maybe sort of obvious thought, but just like as I'm thinking about the city budget, I find it frustrating that there's not some place I can go to be like, for every dollar that I give the city, where does it end up, and what do I get out of that? So to just the extent that you all can do that on the transportation side of things could be helpful. So when we have conversations about like a bike lane versus running transit, there's just some sort of context that we can point to and help ourselves understand too.
Yeah, great comment. Other comments or questions? It was a great suggestion by Harold to put this on the agenda. There's a lot of discussion about the difficulty of the 2025 budget. And it's important to remind everybody of the difference between the operating budget and the capital budget. And, we can be ambassadors for helping carry that conversation forward out into the community and remind everybody about that. And we can ask you to keep us up to date so we can also carry forward things that will support the Department of Transportation as we go through the budgeting process. Alder Figueroa Cole, go ahead.
Thank you. Okay.
We lost you. Go ahead.
I don't know. I hear an echo. So anyhow, I also like to echo that, and if you are, to be real good ambassadors, to if you haven't had a chance to look at Dave's From Finance videos that he put together about the budget, please do so. I don't know if you guys have access to it. I can send a link to the commission if you like. They are in a 4-part session. They're very well documented and very helpful to tell the message. So so definitely there's a lot of information out there to make to have educated conversations. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. It's a very good suggestion. We did include links under this item to those. I looked at the presentations. There's also recordings out there of the various sessions that have been held, along with the timeline for the budget. But, as we go through the process, so please, if you haven't taken a look at those, please do. And again, Tom and Yang and Stephanie and Justin and everybody keep us posted on what we can do to carry forward the message, because we've all seen the positive impact of Safe Streets Madison, of BRT, of all of the various things, Vision Zero. I mean, I don't want to bore you with going through everything, but we all are very supportive of these efforts, and we need to be able to have the resources to continue forward, whether it's on the capital side or the operating side. So we're happy to help, but we need your help to direct us so that we can provide that assistance as ambassadors, as people choose. Certainly not something that's your role, necessarily a role as a Transportation Commission member, but certainly something that would be appreciated if you choose to do that.
Yep.
So other comments or questions? Okay, definitely more to follow on that topic. Next, we have our reports from other VCCs that people are part of. Does anybody have anything to report? Chris?
Yeah, just one quick. The Plan Commission on Monday approved the Monona Waterfront Master Plan, which is a very grand vision with implications for bike and pedestrian and maybe train stations and all that. So be sure to check it out.
Excellent. Thanks. Anybody have any other comments? No? Okay. Next, announcements. As I mentioned earlier, Renee is the new Assistant Director of Planning and Administration for the Traffic Engineering Division. Yang sent out that email. So we're sending you lots of applause, Renee. Very much so. Very, very pleased to see that, and very well deserved. Yang, did you have any other comments?
Thank you, Ann. No, except that, again, congrats to Renee for the, very well-deserved promotion. She has done so much, for traffic engineering and for the city, and you have been making very, very valuable contribution to our team. And so we're really glad to find an opportunity to get her promoted. And I know that, we had discussions, and I feel like, she will be making an even bigger contribution, to the city in her new role. So I'm looking forward to that. So, yeah. And thank you to everyone for the support. I saw so many of you sending, your congrats to Renee, and, I really appreciate that. So thanks.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks. And Renee, we see you all the time, and we hear your great contributions, and we see how hard you work and what you have contributed on so many of the important initiatives. So I just wanted to take this moment to publicly thank you and congratulate you.
Thanks, everyone. I won't make a speech because it's almost 8:30, but I appreciate your emails.
Okay, thanks so much. Anybody have any other announcements from staff? No? Okay. Future agenda items would be next. I included, so in terms of the April 24th meeting, we've got some bus stop changes coming from Metro, potentially Safe Streets Madison, possibly crossing guard policy, Bartolon Path. Chris Pedikowski will be bringing that, and I hope to have the annual work plan ready to bring. If not, that'll come in May. And then I also included a document under this item where I included the remaining items, and the 2025 budget outlook we talked about tonight, and that'll certainly be recurring. But I included the other ones that have not, I don't think, have been addressed. So if you haven't had an opportunity to look at it, please do. And For example, Robbie, I have discussion regarding including TDM requirements and contracts for businesses leasing city parking. I tried to capture what people mentioned at the meetings and where they haven't been addressed yet. And how we plan to use this list is, when we have meetings where we have the time on the agenda to fill in, we'll take the opportunity to do that where the information's available and we can. So I don't want to necessarily take the time here to go over each and every one, but I plan to include this under this item each time and update it as we have changes, as we have additions, or as we've addressed them and we can take them off. So please take a look at it and send me any updates, and I'll incorporate them. So anybody have any other future agenda items that you want to have added right now? Okay, just send me any that you have or any feedback. And with that, we need a motion to adjourn. Chris.
Yes, I move adjournment.
Excellent. And Harold.
Second.
And a second. And I'm assuming a unanimous consent vote. And thanks, everybody. Take care till next time.